The maid was sent to take care of the mad prince, but only she understood the pain of his isolation. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. Eleanor Hart was polishing a silver tray when a shadow fell over the scullery door. Eleanor, she looked up. Mr. Pell, the under-butler, stood with his hands folded, as if he were made of the same stiff cloth as his coat. Yes, sir. Put that down now. Her fingers tightened around the cloth. The tray showed her face in pieces. She set it on the table with care. Have I done something wrong, sir? You have been requested. Requested. In the palace, that word could mean anything from a lost button to a ruined life. By whom? She asked, and hated how small her voice sounded. Mr. Pell's mouth barely moved. Lady Cromere. A few heads turned. A kitchen maid paused with a bucket. Someone's spoon clinked too loudly, then stopped. Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron, untied it and folded it as if folding could steady her breathing. Mr. Pell led her through passages where servants walked quickly and spoke softly. The palace did not like noise unless it was laughter meant for guests. They stopped before a door Eleanor had never entered. It was not grand, it was plain, which somehow made it worse. Mr. Pell knocked once and opened without waiting. Lady Agatha Cromere sat at a small desk. She was not old, not truly, but her eyes had the flat patience of someone who had watched many people break and found it ordinary. Come in, Lady Cromere said. Close the door. Eleanor obeyed, hands clasped in front of her. Lady Cromere looked her up and down the way a cook might inspect a potato. You are Eleanor Hart? Yes, my lady. You have no family in London? No, my lady. You have no suitor visiting the gates on Sundays? No, my lady. Lady Cromere's gaze sharpened. You can read? A little. A little is enough to be dangerous, and not enough to be useful. Perfect. Eleanor's throat went dry. My lady, you will be reassigned. Eleanor tried to swallow. Reassigned where, my lady? Lady Cromere took a thin paper from a drawer and tapped it once on the desk. You will attend in the North Wing. Eleanor blinked. The North Wing was not a place servants spoke of with certainty. The older ones exchanged looks when it was mentioned, as if the name itself might summon trouble. My lady, I have never been there. That is why you are going. Eleanor's fingers pressed into her palm. Forgive me, but I do not understand. Lady Cromere smiled. It was not unkind. It was worse than unkind. It was calm. You are quiet. You are plain. You do not attract attention. People do not notice you unless you spill something. I try not to spill, my lady. Quite. Lady Cromere stood, smoothing her cuffs. There is a gentleman resident in that wing. He requires care. A gentleman, not a guest. Resident. Eleanor felt as if the air had shifted. Is he ill? Lady Cromere's eyes flicked toward the door, as if the wood might be listening. He is particular. Eleanor waited. Silence in a palace was a language. If you filled it too quickly, you paid. Lady Cromere walked around the desk, coming close enough that Eleanor could smell faint lavender on her gloves. You will perform simple tasks, meals, linen, tidying. You will speak only when spoken to. You will not speak of what you see, hear, or suspect to anyone. Not to the other girls, not to the kitchen, not to the chapel, not to your own pillow. Eleanor's lips parted. My lady, I would never— Never is a word spoken by those who have never been frightened, Lady Cromere said, still calm. Listen carefully. This is not a punishment. It is employment, and it will remain employment so long as you remember your station. Eleanor forced herself to breathe. Yes, my lady. Lady Cromere lifted her chin. You will not wander. You will not open any door you have not been told to open. You will not look from the windows. Eleanor frowned before she could stop it. Not look from the windows? Lady Cromere's voice cooled by a degree. Do you need me to repeat myself? No, my lady. Good. Mr. Pell will escort you to Mrs. Greaves at once. Eleanor hesitated. May I ask who the gentleman is? Lady Cromere's gaze held hers. No. Eleanor's cheeks warmed. Forgive me. Lady Cromere stepped back, as if Eleanor had ceased to exist. Go. Mr. Pell guided her away. His steps were even, but his eyes stayed forward too firmly. Sir, Eleanor whispered as they turned a corner. What is in the North Wing? Mr. Pell's jaw tightened. Work. Only work. He did not answer. They reached a narrow stair. The air changed with each step, cooler, less lived in. The palace above was full of murmurs and footsteps, and the faint music of a household that wanted to be admired. Here, the quiet pressed closer. At a landing, a woman waited with a ring of keys at her waist. Mrs. Greaves, a stout housekeeper's assistant with hands like bread dough and eyes like stone. "Pell," she said, "you brought her?" "I did." Mrs. Greaves inspected Eleanor with the same practiced look as Lady Cromere, but with less elegance. "Name, Eleanor Hart." Mrs. Greaves grunted. "You got strong arms?" "I can carry, ma'am." "You got a weak stomach?" "No, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves nodded once, as if pleased by the answer, or at least willing to tolerate it. "Then you'll do." Eleanor stared at the keys. They hung heavy like authority-made metal. Mrs. Greaves began to walk. "Mind your feet, mind your mouth, mind your eyes." Eleanor hurried to keep up. "Yes, ma'am." They passed a corridor Eleanor had never seen. There were fewer portraits. The carpet was worn at the edges, as if the palace itself had forgotten to pretend here. At last, Mrs. Greaves stopped before a door that did not match the others. The wood was darker. The hinges were thick. A lock sat on it like a clenched fist. Eleanor's heart knocked against her ribs. Mrs. Greaves held up a finger. "Rules." Eleanor nodded quickly. "You go in. You do what you're told. You do not argue with Dr. Crichton. You do not touch the cabinet. You do not move the chair by the window. You do not speak of His Highness." Eleanor's head lifted. "His Highness?" Mrs. Greaves's mouth set. "You heard me." Eleanor's hands turned cold. "A prince?" Mrs. Greaves leaned in, voice low and sharp. "You will not say that word in there. You will not say it anywhere." Eleanor's lips formed the question she feared, and it slipped out anyway. "Why is he here?" Mrs. Greaves straightened. "Because that is where they put problems they cannot cure." Eleanor swallowed hard. "Is he dangerous?" Mrs. Greaves's eyes narrowed. "He is changeable." That was not comfort. It was a warning dressed in a smaller word. Mrs. Greaves slid a key into the lock, turned it slowly and pulled the door open a hand's width. Before Eleanor could see inside, Mrs. Greaves grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Listen," she hissed. "You were chosen because you are nothing. Do you understand me?" Eleanor's breath caught. "I am not—" "To them," Mrs. Greaves corrected. "Not to me. Not to God, if God is listening. But to those upstairs, you are nothing. That means you are safe enough to send, and easy enough to replace. So you will keep yourself useful." Eleanor's mouth went dry. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves let go. "Good. Go in." Eleanor stepped through. The air smelled of clean linen and something bitter underneath, like herbs left too long in water. The room was larger than she expected, but it felt smaller because of the doors. Two inner doors stood shut. The windows were high, and their curtains were drawn. A small table held a tea service. A tray had been set as if by habit rather than hospitality. Eleanor heard a sound not loud, a scrape like a chair shifting. She turned. In the shadow near the far wall, a man sat with his head bowed. His hair was dark and slightly too long, as if no one bothered to trim it properly. His clothes were fine, but the way they hung on him made her think of garments placed on a statue. He did not look up. Eleanor's mouth opened, then closed. She had expected, she did not know what, shouting, rage, a wild glare. Instead, she felt the heavy ache of a room where someone had waited too long without being spoken to like a person. Mrs. Greaves stayed by the door. "Eleanor will be attending." No response. Mrs. Greaves's voice sharpened. "Your tea, yours, sir." The man's fingers twitched once at the word. "Sir, not your highness, not prince. Sir," as if the palace could shrink him by changing the name. Eleanor took a step forward, careful. "Good afternoon, sir." The man's shoulders rose a fraction, then fell. He still did not look up. Mrs. Greaves nodded toward the tray. "Serve." Eleanor moved to the table. Her hands wanted to shake, but she kept them steady. She picked up the teapot. The man's voice came suddenly, low and rough, as if unused. "Do you know where you are?" Eleanor froze with the pot half raised. She looked at him. His face was turned slightly away, but she could see his jaw tense. as if he expected her answer to hurt. "Yes, sir," she said. His mouth tightened. "Then you're either foolish or cruel." Eleanor set the pot down gently. "I do not wish to be either." A short breath left him. It might have been a laugh, but it held no joy. Mrs. Greaves interrupted. "Drink, sir. It's time." The man's head lifted a little, not enough to meet anyone's eyes. "It is always time, is it not?" Mrs. Greaves's cheeks reddened. "Do not start." Eleanor watched the exchange. She noticed Mrs. Greaves did not step further into the room. She stayed at the door as if it were a shoreline. Eleanor picked up the cup and saucer. The china trembled only once. She carried it toward him. At 3 steps away, the man's head snapped up. Eleanor stopped. His eyes were grey and bright in a way that made her think of a storm held behind glass. Not wild, alert, too alert. He stared at the cup as if it were an insult. "Who told you to come close?" he asked. "I did," Eleanor said, surprised by her own steadiness. "So I might hand it to you without spilling." His gaze flicked to her face. The focus was sharp, then slipped, as if something inside him pulled the world sideways. "No one spills," he murmured. "They only drop." Mrs. Greaves clicked her tongue. "Take it, sir." The man's fingers curled on the arm of the chair. "And if I do not?" Mrs. Greaves's eyes flashed to Eleanor. "Then Eleanor will clear the tray and we will come back when you are sensible." The man's gaze returned to Eleanor, and for a second she saw something like pleading behind the hardness. "Go," he said to her. The word sounded like a shove, but his eyes begged. Eleanor did not move. She lowered the cup slightly. "Sir," she said softly, "your tea will grow cold." His lips parted, then pressed together. A muscle worked in his cheek. "I do not care," he said. "I care," Eleanor answered before she could stop herself. Mrs. Greaves sucked in a breath. "Eleanor." Eleanor's skin prickled, but she kept her eyes on the man. "Not because you are important," she added quickly, trying to mend what she had done. "Because cold tea is miserable, sir." The man's gaze held hers. His breathing was shallow. Then his eyes dropped to the cup again. He lifted his hand, slowly, as if testing whether his own body would obey him. Eleanor offered the cup. His fingers brushed the china. They were cold. He took it, but he did not drink. He simply held it, staring at the steam. Mrs. Greaves's shoulders loosened, as if she had been holding a rope and had not realized it. "Good," Mrs. Greaves said, too brisk. "That's done." Eleanor set the saucer on a small table by his chair, close enough that he did not have to lean far. The man's voice came again, quieter. "What is your name?" Eleanor blinked. "Eleanor, sir." His lips moved as if shaping the sound. "Eleanor." It sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. Mrs. Greaves stepped forward an inch. "No talk. He must not be excited." The man's head turned toward her with sudden coldness. "Excited," he repeated. "Is that the word you use when a person speaks?" Mrs. Greaves flushed. "Drink your tea." He looked away. Mrs. Greaves gestured toward the inner door. "Come. We have linens to sort." Eleanor hesitated, glancing at the man. "Do you require anything else, sir?" His eyes cut back to her. "Require." The word came out sharp, like he hated it. Eleanor's hands tightened on her apron ribbon. "Would you like more tea later?" His stare held, then flickered. "No." Eleanor nodded and followed Mrs. Greaves into the adjoining room. It held shelves with folded sheets, towels and garments. Everything was arranged with strict neatness, as if order could stand in for care. Mrs. Greaves spoke low. "You did too much." Eleanor's face heated. You spoke to him," Mrs. Greaves snapped. "You spoke like he was a person." Eleanor stared. "Is he not?" Mrs. Greaves's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Listen to me. If you make him talk, you make him think. If he thinks, he remembers. If he remembers, he becomes upset. If he becomes upset, Dr. Crichton increases the tonic. And then it's worse for everyone." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Worse for him." Mrs. Greaves's mouth tightened. "Worse for you, too." Eleanor forced her hands to keep moving as she sorted towels into piles. "Does the tonic help him?" Mrs. Greaves gave a short laugh with no humor. "It helps him be quiet." Eleanor's stomach turned. She kept her face still. "And if he is quiet, they are satisfied." Mrs. Greaves looked at her sharply. "Now you understand." Eleanor lowered her voice. Why do they keep him here? Mrs. Greaves's fingers paused over a sheet. Because he is a prince. Eleanor's breath caught again. Hearing it said plainly made it real. Mrs. Greaves continued, voice flat. Because a prince cannot be sent away like a drunk uncle or a troublesome cousin. Because if he is seen as unwell, it must be managed. Because if he is managed, it must be hidden. And because if it is hidden, people like Lady Cromere can sleep at night. Eleanor's hands went numb. What is his name? Mrs. Greaves hesitated. Then, reluctantly, she said, Edmund. Eleanor repeated it in her mind. Edmund, a name that sounded proper, even gentle. From the main room there was a small sound, a cup set down too hard. Mrs. Greaves stiffened. Come. They returned. Edmund sat very still. The cup was on the table now, untouched. His fingers pressed into the chair's arm, white at the knuckles. Mrs. Greaves strode to the tray and set down a small glass with a dark liquid. Eleanor's heart jumped. What is that? Mrs. Greaves shot her a look. The tonic. Edmund's eyes fixed on the glass. His breathing quickened. No, he said. Mrs. Greaves's voice sharpened. It's time. Edmund's mouth tightened. It is always time. Eleanor watched him. The fear in him was not theatrical. It was familiar, like a child who knows what comes next and cannot stop it. Mrs. Greaves lifted the glass. Take it. Edmund's head turned away, jaw clenched. Mrs. Greaves's gaze flicked to Eleanor. You. Tell him. Eleanor's skin prickled. Ma'am? Mrs. Greaves thrust the glass toward her. You're his attendant now, tell him. Eleanor took the glass. It was warm from Mrs. Greaves's hand. She could smell something sharp in it. She stepped closer to Edmund, careful again, the way one approaches a frightened horse. Sir, she said softly, this is meant to help you. Edmund's eyes flashed to her. Is it? Eleanor's mouth went dry. She could not lie easily. Not with those eyes on her. Mrs. Greaves hissed, Say it. Eleanor lowered her voice so only Edmund could hear. Do you feel better after you take it? His gaze did not waver. No. Eleanor's chest tightened. She looked at the glass. Then why must you take it? Edmund's lips curled, not in amusement, in pain. Because it makes it easier for them to forget I exist. Eleanor's hand trembled once. She steadied it by pressing her thumb against the glass. Mrs. Greaves snapped. Eleanor! Eleanor looked at Edmund. His shoulders were rigid. His eyes were bright with an effort to remain composed. She thought of Lady Cromere's calm voice. You are nothing. Safe enough to send. Easy enough to replace. Eleanor took a breath. Ma'am, she said, turning slightly. May I bring him tea first? The tonic on an empty stomach. Mrs. Greaves's eyes widened. Do not presume to. It might settle him, Eleanor insisted, keeping her tone respectful, almost timid. She did not argue like a bold girl. She argued like a maid concerned with mess and inconvenience. If he grows unwell, it will take longer to clean. Mrs. Greaves's lips pressed together. She glanced at Edmund, then at the clock, then back at Eleanor, as if calculating trouble. Fine, she snapped. 5 minutes, not more. Eleanor nodded quickly. Thank you, ma'am. Mrs. Greaves moved to the door, muttering, I'll fetch the physician if he refuses again. When she was gone, Eleanor exhaled shakily. She set the tonic on the table, out of Edmund's reach but within sight, as if pretending it had not disappeared. She poured fresh tea. Her hands worked with trained precision, but her mind raced. She carried the cup to Edmund again. Tea, sir. He watched her. Why? Because it is warm, Eleanor said. Because it is ordinary. He gave a short, bitter breath. Nothing here is ordinary. Eleanor held the cup steady. This can be. His eyes dropped to the tea, then back to her face. You are new? Yes. He stared as if trying to decide what kind of danger she was. Eleanor lowered the cup a fraction. I will not force it into your mouth, sir. A flicker crossed his face. Surprise and something that looked like relief before he swallowed it down. You speak too much, he said. I can speak less, Eleanor answered. If you will drink. His mouth tightened. A bargain. Yes, Eleanor said gently. A small one. His hand lifted again, slow, uncertain. He took the cup. This time he drank. Not much. A few sips. But Eleanor saw the tightness in his shoulders loosen by a thread. He lowered the cup. His fingers lingered around it. Eleanor tried to keep her voice light. "Is it too hot?" He shook his head once. "Too sweet." Another small shake. Eleanor nodded, as if this was normal conversation between any servant and any master. The pretense felt like a blanket she could pull over them both. From the corridor, footsteps approached again. "Mrs." Greaves returned, brisk, eyes sharp. "Tea done?" she demanded. Edmund's gaze flicked away at once, as if the small piece had been stolen. Eleanor set the empty cup down. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves snatched up the tonic. "Now." Edmund went still. Eleanor's pulse thudded in her ears. She had bought 5 minutes. Now those 5 minutes stood between him and the glass. Mrs. Greaves shoved it toward him. "Drink." Edmund's jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the dark liquid as if it were a chain. Eleanor stepped closer, not to take the glass, but to be within his sight. "Sir," she said softly, "if you take it, will you feel worse?" Edmund's eyes cut to hers. "Yes." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "Then," Mrs. Greaves snapped, "Eleanor, do not start that again." Eleanor forced herself to stay calm. She looked at Mrs. Greaves with mild concern, the expression of a maid thinking of stains and sick buckets. "Ma'am," she said, "if he becomes unwell, he may not sleep. Then he will be restless. Then Dr. Crichton will be annoyed. Then you will be annoyed, and I will be scolded for it." Mrs. Greaves glared. "And what is your solution?" Eleanor's mind raced. She could not refuse outright. She could not win by defiance. She had to win by appearing obedient. "My solution," Eleanor said quietly, "is to give him a little bread first, just a crust, so it sits easier." Mrs. Greaves stared, as if Eleanor had grown a second head. Then her gaze flicked to Edmund, measuring his stillness, his clenched restraint. "It is not in the instructions," Mrs. Greaves said. Eleanor lowered her eyes. "No, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves hesitated. The hesitation was a crack Eleanor could slip through. "Fine," Mrs. Greaves said sharply. "But quick. And if you make trouble, I will see you out myself." Eleanor dipped her head. "Yes, ma'am." She moved to the sideboard, hands steadying as she reached for the bread plate. She broke a small piece, the simplest thing in the world. She brought it to Edmund, holding it out without forcing it. He stared at it as if he did not know what it was meant for. "It is bread," Eleanor said very softly. "Just bread." His gaze lifted to hers. "Why are you doing this?" Eleanor's throat tightened. She could not say, "Because it hurts to watch you be frightened." She could not say, "Because they are using you." So she said the safest truth. "Because I do not like seeing anyone made to swallow bitterness on an empty stomach." Edmund's mouth twitched as if he might smile, but it did not arrive. Still, he took the bread. He ate slowly, eyes never leaving Eleanor's face, as if memorizing her for later. Mrs. Greaves thrust the tonic forward again. "Now!" Edmund's fingers closed around the glass. His hand trembled. Eleanor watched his throat work as he swallowed. Once, twice. His eyes shut briefly, then opened again, shining with a restrained humiliation. Mrs. Greaves took the glass away at once, as if even the sight of it might stain the room. "Good," she said briskly. "Now, Eleanor, you will tidy. I will return later." She paused at the door. No foolishness. Then she was gone, locking the door behind her with a click that made Eleanor flinch. Silence rushed in. Edmund sat with his head bowed again, as if the effort of being watched had exhausted him. Eleanor stood uncertainly, hands clasped. She did not know whether to speak. The air felt tender, easily broken. After a long moment, Edmund's voice came, barely audible. "You will be blamed for that." Eleanor's brow furrowed. "For what, sir?" "For interfering," he said, eyes still down. "For trying to soften what cannot be softened." Eleanor swallowed. "I did not do much." "That is the point," Edmund murmured. "Even a little becomes a crime here." Eleanor felt a chill. "They blame you often." His mouth tightened. "They blame the air when the room is cold." Eleanor drew a careful breath. "If you feel unwell, sir, I can fetch water." "No," Edmund said quickly. Then more quietly, "Do not leave." Eleanor's chest tightened at the word. "Do not leave, not an order, a plea disguised as one." "I will stay," she said. Edmund's shoulders eased by the smallest measure. "You will not stay long," he said, as if warning himself. Eleanor busied her hands with the tray, the cloth, the teapot. She moved quietly. But she did not hurry away. She did not make herself invisible. She simply existed in the room as if she had a right to stand there. Time passed in small tasks, folding, straightening, refilling the kettle. Once, Edmund spoke again. "What did Lady Crowmere tell you?" Eleanor paused with the cloth in her hand. "She told me to work." Edmund's laugh came as a soft, harsh breath, and nothing more. "She told me not to look from the windows," Eleanor admitted. Edmund's head lifted a fraction. "Ah." Eleanor frowned. "Why?" He did not answer. His gaze drifted toward the curtains, as if there were something beyond them he refused to name. Eleanor's curiosity tugged at her, but she kept it leashed. Curiosity was a luxury. A maid paid for it dearly. Later, when Edmund's eyes began to glaze with tiredness, Eleanor moved more quietly, as if the room itself might bruise him. A small bell by the door sat unused. Eleanor wondered if it had ever been rung. In the late afternoon, the lock clicked. Mrs. Greaves returned with another maid behind her, a girl with red cheeks and fearful eyes. "This is Millie," Mrs. Greaves said. "She will bring supplies when you ring. You will not wander out, understood?" "Yes, ma'am," Eleanor said. Millie peered into the room without stepping over the threshold. Her gaze flicked to Edmund and then away, fast, as if looking might summon trouble. Mrs. Greaves spoke to Millie, sharp. "No whispering, no telling tales. You bring what you're asked, you keep your mouth closed." Millie nodded too many times. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves turned to Eleanor. "Supper will come at 6. Dr. Crichton will arrive after. You will prepare the room." Eleanor nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves's eyes narrowed. "You will follow the schedule." Eleanor lowered her gaze. "Yes, ma'am." The door locked again. Edmund's voice came faint. "Schedule." Eleanor turned. "Sir?" He stared at his hands. They love that word. It makes cruelty sound like order. Eleanor's chest tightened. "Does the schedule trouble you?" His eyes lifted. "Everything troubles me." Eleanor wanted to say, "Then let me help." But she could not be foolish. She could only do small things, one at a time. So she asked, "Would you like the curtains opened a little for air?" Edmund's gaze flicked to the windows, his breath caught. "No." Eleanor nodded quickly. "All right." Edmund's voice sharpened suddenly. "Do not look from them." Eleanor froze. "I wasn't going to." He stared at her, eyes bright with fear and anger mixed together. "Promise." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I promise, sir." His shoulders eased again, as if he had secured a fragile thing. At 6, supper arrived in covered dishes, pushed through by Millie under the crack of the door, and then retrieved by Eleanor. Millie did not speak. Her eyes begged Eleanor not to make her speak. Eleanor set the tray on the table. Edmund's gaze flicked to it with little interest. "You should eat," Eleanor said softly. "I do," Edmund replied, voice flat. Enough to keep them from changing the schedule. Eleanor served him anyway. A small portion, not too much to insult, not too little to appear neglectful. He ate a few bites and stopped. Eleanor did not press. She simply sat at the small chair by the table, not too close, not too far, her hands folded in her lap, waiting like a sentry who did not know what battle would come. Edmund watched her. "What do you want?" he asked. Eleanor blinked. "Nothing, sir." He gave a short breath. "Everyone wants something." Eleanor chose her words. "Then perhaps I want to do my work properly." Edmund's gaze narrowed. "Properly?" "Yes." He leaned back a fraction. The movement looked like effort. "You are afraid," he said. Eleanor's cheeks warmed. "Yes, sir." "Good," he said quietly. "Fear is sensible here." Eleanor's hands tightened. "Are you afraid?" His mouth twisted. "Always." Eleanor's throat tightened around an impulse to speak kindly. Instead, she asked carefully, "May I clear the tray?" He nodded once. When she lifted the dishes, she noticed a small smear of tonic at the rim of the glass from earlier. Her stomach turned again. She carried everything to the sideboard and wiped it down, slow and thorough. A knock came at the door. Then another. Mrs. Greaves's voice. "Open." Eleanor rose and pulled the door open as far as the chain allowed. Mrs. Greaves stood with a tall man behind her in a dark coat. His hair was neatly combed. His expression was polished, like furniture. Dr. Crichton. He did not look at Eleanor first. His eyes went straight to Edmund, assessing him the way a tailor assesses a coat. "How has he been?" Dr. Crichton asked Mrs. Greaves. Mrs. Greaves spoke quickly. He took the tonic. He ate a little. Dr. Crichton's gaze moved to Eleanor at last. And you are the new attendant? Yes, sir. Name, Eleanor Hart. He nodded once, as if writing it in his mind without interest. You understand you are here to keep the household quiet. Eleanor's pulse thudded. I am here to attend, sir. Dr. Crichton's mouth lifted at one corner. Attend, yes. And in attending you will avoid agitation. We do not want excitement. Edmund's fingers tightened on the chair arm. Dr. Crichton walked into the room without looking at Edmund's face. He moved to the cabinet at the side, unlocked it with a key taken from his own pocket, and withdrew a small bottle. Eleanor watched. Mrs. Greaves had told her not to touch the cabinet. Dr. Crichton did not have that restriction. It was his power made visible. Dr. Crichton poured a measured amount into a glass. Edmund's breath quickened. Dr. Crichton spoke as if Edmund were not there. He has had a calmer day. Yes, sir, Eleanor heard herself say. Dr. Crichton's gaze snapped to her. Has he? Eleanor's throat tightened. He drank tea. He ate bread before the tonic. Mrs. Greaves sucked in a breath like someone swallowing a shout. Dr. Crichton stared at Eleanor for a long moment, then set the bottle down with precise care. That was not instructed, he said. Eleanor lowered her eyes. No, sir, I thought it might. You are not paid to think, Dr. Crichton said mildly. You are paid to follow the schedule. Edmund's voice cut in, low and sharp. Do not speak to her that way. Dr. Crichton did not even glance at him. You will take your medicine. Edmund's jaw clenched. I took it. Dr. Crichton lifted the new glass. You will take this as well. Eleanor's heart lurched. Another dose. She looked at Mrs. Greaves, hoping to see doubt. Mrs. Greaves's face was tight and obedient. Edmund's breathing grew shallow. His gaze darted to Eleanor, a silent warning. Dr. Crichton extended the glass toward Edmund. Now, Eleanor stepped forward before she could stop herself, not in defiance, in the smallest possible interruption. Sir, she said, voice steady, he has already taken the tonic. Another so soon may make him ill. Dr. Crichton's gaze fell on her like a weight. And if he is ill, he will be quiet. Eleanor's stomach turned. The words were spoken without cruelty, without anger, as if quietness were the only virtue left in the world. Edmund's eyes shut briefly. When they opened, they were wet with contained fury and contained shame. Eleanor's hands clenched at her sides. She forced herself to stay calm. A maid did not win by temper. Dr. Crichton's voice remained polite. Step aside. Eleanor did not move fast enough. Mrs. Greaves hissed, Eleanor! Eleanor stepped back, cheeks burning. Edmund stared at the glass, then at the floor. His shoulders rose and fell. Slowly, he took it. Eleanor watched his throat work as he swallowed. Once, twice. Then he set the empty glass down with a carefulness that looked like restraint barely holding. Dr. Crichton nodded as if a problem had been solved. He put the bottle away and locked the cabinet again. Good, he said. Then to Mrs. Greaves, increase the dosage tomorrow. He is too responsive today. Eleanor's breath caught. Dr. Crichton turned toward the door. This wing must remain calm. The palace cannot indulge episodes. Edmund's voice was a whisper that still cut. You fear my voice more than you fear your own conscience. Dr. Crichton paused. He looked at Edmund at last, with the cool interest of a man examining a specimen. My conscience is not your concern, he said. Then he left. Mrs. Greaves followed, locking the door behind her. Silence returned, heavier than before. Edmund's head bowed. His fingers dug into the chair arm. Eleanor watched his shoulders, the slight tremor that ran through him as the tonic began to press down on him like a slow blanket. Eleanor moved quietly. She fetched water. She set it within reach. She did not speak unless he spoke. Minutes passed. Edmund's voice came thick. You will be punished. Eleanor's throat tightened. For speaking, for existing near me, he murmured. They do not like witnesses. Eleanor's hands clenched. Then perhaps they should not do things they are ashamed to be seen doing. Edmund gave a small, broken breath that might have been laughter. You are brave. Eleanor shook her head quickly. No, sir. I am frightened. Brave and frightened are often the same, he said, words slurring slightly at the edges. Eleanor swallowed. Do you feel unwell? He hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. Eleanor's chest tightened. "Would it help if I read to you?" His eyes opened a fraction. "You read." "A little," Eleanor said. He made a sound like disbelief. "They send a girl who can read." Eleanor's cheeks warmed. "Not well, only enough for prayers and notices." Edmund's gaze drifted away. "Notices," he repeated, as if the word carried a memory. Eleanor stood still, waiting. After a long pause, Edmund spoke again, barely audible. "Do not trust them." Eleanor whispered, "I do not think I do." His eyelids drooped. "Good." The tonic pulled him toward sleep, but it did not look like rest. It looked like surrender. When his breathing evened, Eleanor moved around the room again, tidying, folding, wiping, doing anything to keep her hands from shaking. She found her gaze drifting to the cabinet, locked, then to the tray, clean, then to the table. A small pile of folded cloth, and there, under the edge of a serving tray, she saw something that did not belong. A corner of paper, torn, crumpled, as if hidden quickly. Eleanor's pulse jumped. She glanced at Edmund. He was still, eyes closed. Eleanor slid the tray aside with care and pulled the paper free. It was part of a schedule, lines ruled, times listed, a physician's neat hand. But what caught her was one repeated instruction, written twice, as if someone wanted it obeyed more than remembered. Increase dosage. Ensure silence. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the torn paper until the edge bit her skin. Increase dosage. Ensure silence. She read it again, slower, as if the words might change out of shame. Behind her, Edmund's breathing remained steady, but it was not peaceful. It sounded like a man being pulled under by something heavy. Eleanor folded the paper into a smaller square, then smaller. She slid it into the seam of her apron near her waist where cloth overlapped cloth, a place no one searched unless they meant to disgrace you. Her hands shook after she hid it. She forced herself to smooth the tray as if nothing had happened, as if she was simply doing the work she had been sent to do. The lock clicked a while later. Mrs. Greaves entered first, face set, and behind her Millie with a basket of linens. Millie kept her eyes down. Mrs. Greaves scanned the room like a woman counting problems. "He slept?" Eleanor nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves went closer to Edmund, not touching him, only looking. His eyelids fluttered once. Mrs. Greaves sniffed. "Good. Keep him that way." Eleanor's stomach tightened, but she kept her face plain. "Yes, ma'am." Millie set the basket down and darted back to the door, as if the air inside might cling to her. Mrs. Greaves turned on Eleanor. "Lady Cromere wants you upstairs." Eleanor's breath caught. Now. Eleanor glanced at Edmund. His eyes were open as sliver, not awake, not fully, but seeing. She leaned slightly toward him, voice low. "I have to step out, sir. I will return." His gaze slid toward her unfocused. "Do not speak," he murmured. Eleanor froze. "What, sir?" His brow furrowed faintly, as if the effort of thought hurt. Listen." Mrs. Greaves snapped. "Move!" Eleanor straightened, hands clasped. She followed Mrs. Greaves out. The door locked behind them with that familiar click that felt like a verdict. As they walked, Eleanor whispered, "Why does Lady Cromere want me?" Mrs. Greaves's eyes stayed forward. "Because you were new yesterday and today you are already noticeable." Eleanor's cheeks warmed. "I tried to be—" Mrs. Greaves cut her off. "Invisible." "Yes, try harder." They climbed back into the lived part of the palace. The air warmed. Sounds returned. Footsteps, murmurs, a distant laugh that did not belong to Eleanor's world. Mrs. Greaves did not take her to Lady Cromere's office this time. She took her to a room where servants gathered in the morning, receiving instructions. A long table, benches, a line of faces turning the moment Eleanor stepped in. Eleanor's mouth went dry. Lady Cromere stood near the far end, immaculate. Mr. Pell waited by the wall, as still as a coat on a stand. 2 footmen stood behind, eyes blank. Lady Cromere did not raise her voice. She did not have to. "Eleanor Hart," she said. Eleanor stepped forward, feeling every gaze like a hand on her back. "Yes, my lady." Lady Cromere lifted a paper. "You were told to follow the schedule." "Yes, my lady, and yet you altered it." Eleanor's throat tightened. I only— Lady Cromere held up one gloved finger. Do not explain yourself yet. First, you will answer a simple question. Eleanor swallowed. Yes, my lady. Lady Cromere's eyes moved over the room, making certain every servant was listening. Do you understand why you were chosen for this assignment? The heat rose in Eleanor's face. The room seemed to lean closer. I understand I am to be useful, my lady, she said carefully. Lady Cromere's smile was small. Useful, yes, but also harmless, uninteresting. The sort of girl people forget the moment they turn away. A few servants looked down quickly, relieved it was not them being named. A few looked at Eleanor with pity that stung worse than disdain. Eleanor held still, her hands clasped so tightly her fingers ached. Lady Cromere continued, voice like a blade wrapped in velvet. And yet in less than a day you have inserted yourself into matters beyond your station. Eleanor tried to keep her voice steady. My lady, I did not mean to cause trouble. Trouble, Lady Cromere repeated, as if tasting the word. How strange. You believe this is about trouble? Eleanor's breath caught. My lady, Lady Cromere stepped closer. This is about order, about discretion, about what must remain quiet. Eleanor felt the torn paper against her apron seam as if it had turned hot. Lady Cromere turned slightly and addressed the room. The North Wing is not a place for gossip. It is not a place for curiosity. It is not a place for sentimental notions. No one spoke. No one moved. Lady Cromere's gaze returned to Eleanor. You will not speak to him unnecessarily. Eleanor opened her mouth. Lady Cromere's eyes narrowed. You will not bargain with him. You will not change what is given to him. You will not delay what is scheduled. You will not invent yourself as a nurse, a friend, or anything else. Eleanor's chest tightened. Yes, my lady. Lady Cromere held out another paper. And because you have already shown an unfortunate tendency toward improvisation, you will sign this. Eleanor stared at the paper. The ink was crisp. The lines were clean. Lady Cromere tapped the bottom where a space waited for a name. Read. Eleanor's heart thudded hard. My lady, Read, Lady Cromere repeated, still calm. Eleanor took the paper with careful hands, as if it might burn her. The room blurred at the edges as she forced her eyes to move over the words. It was written as if it were reasonable. A statement that Eleanor Hart acknowledged she had failed to follow instructions and had contributed to agitation in the North Wing, and that she accepted responsibility for any future disturbances due to her interference. Eleanor's mouth went dry. She read it again, hoping she had misunderstood. Lady Cromere watched her face with quiet interest. Eleanor lowered the paper slightly. My lady, it says I caused agitation. Lady Cromere's voice was mild. Did you not? Eleanor's chest tightened. He was calmer. Lady Cromere's gaze sharpened. Do you see? Improvisation again. You speak as if your observations matter. Eleanor's fingers curled around the page. My lady, I only brought him bread and tea. Lady Cromere's smile returned. How touching. Bread and tea. And yet, Doctor, Crichton reported you questioned his judgment. Eleanor felt her blood cool. Dr. Crichton had reported her. Of course he had. Lady Cromere nodded toward the inkwell on the table. Sign. Eleanor looked at the pen. It lay there like a trap with a polished handle. If she signed, she would be admitting guilt. She would be placing a chain around her own neck. She would be giving them permission to blame her for anything that happened near Edmund. If she refused, she would be dismissed. Marked. Unhired. Perhaps worse, though Lady Cromere would not say it aloud. A maid without a reference might as well be a ghost. Lady Cromere's tone softened, as if offering a kindness. Eleanor, you are young. You are not clever enough to fight the palace. Do not make your life harder than it must be. The room held its breath. Eleanor looked down at the paper again. Her vision blurred for a moment, and she blinked hard. My lady, she said, voice quiet, may I ask one question? Lady Cromere's eyes narrowed a fraction. No. Eleanor's cheeks warmed with the old familiar burn of being corrected. She lowered her gaze. Forgive me. Lady Cromere gestured to the pen. Sign. Eleanor's hand moved toward it, then stopped. Not because she was brave, because she was suddenly certain of something she had not been certain of yesterday. They did not want care. They wanted silence. Eleanor's voice came out smaller than she wished. "My lady, if I sign and if something goes wrong, will I be blamed?" Lady Cromer's eyes held hers. "If something goes wrong, someone will be blamed. That is how the world stays tidy." Eleanor's stomach tightened. Lady Cromer leaned closer. "You are being offered the chance to remain employed. Take it." Eleanor's fingers hovered over the pen, trembling. Then a voice from the side, low and urgent, broke the stillness. "Do it, Ellie." Eleanor turned her head slightly. It was May, one of the older maids. May's eyes were wide with warning. The message was clear. Do not ruin yourself for something you cannot change. Eleanor looked back at Lady Cromer. Lady Cromer waited, patient as stone. Eleanor's hand closed around the pen. Her fingers did not move to sign. They simply held it. Lady Cromer's voice cooled. "What is the delay?" Eleanor swallowed. "My lady, I do not believe the statement is true." The room shifted. A footman's eyes flicked up, then down again. Someone inhaled too sharply. Lady Cromer did not react with surprise, only with interest, as if Eleanor had finally become a problem worth noticing. "Not true," Lady Cromer repeated. "You are a maid. Truth is not your concern." Eleanor's voice shook, but she spoke anyway. "If it is not my concern, my lady, why must I sign it?" A hush fell so complete, Eleanor could hear her own pulse. Lady Cromer's eyes narrowed. "Because you were instructed to." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the pen. Her knuckles ached. Lady Cromer glanced at Mrs. Greaves. "Take her back to the wing. She will sign when she has remembered what hunger feels like." Mrs. Greaves stepped forward, face tight. "Yes, my lady." Lady Cromer looked at Eleanor one last time. "You will not speak of this." Eleanor's voice came thin. "No, my lady." Mrs. Greaves seized Eleanor's elbow, not roughly, but firmly enough to make a point. She guided her out as the room's eyes followed, some with pity, some with satisfaction, most with relief that it was not them. In the corridor, Mrs. Greaves hissed, "What did you do?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "I didn't sign." Mrs. Greaves's face pinched with anger. "You think you are special?" "No," Eleanor whispered. "I think I am being made into a scapegoat." Mrs. Greaves stopped walking so abruptly, Eleanor nearly stumbled. "Do not say words like that." "It is what it is," Eleanor said, then immediately regretted the boldness. Mrs. Greaves leaned in close. "You have a roof. You have food. You have a wage. Do you know what happens to girls who decide they have principles?" Eleanor's mouth went dry. "They starve. They disappear," Mrs. Greaves corrected, voice low. "Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet way. Doors stop opening. References stop coming. People stop seeing you." Eleanor's chest tightened. "I understand." Mrs. Greaves's eyes searched her face. "Do you? Or are you set on dragging yourself down for a prince who would not even notice your absence?" Eleanor flinched, then steadied herself. "He did notice me." Mrs. Greaves made a sound of disbelief. "He noticed bread." "He noticed my name," Eleanor said. Mrs. Greaves stared at her as if Eleanor had admitted to stealing the crown jewels. "Do not be foolish." Eleanor pressed her lips together. She followed Mrs. Greaves down the stair again, back toward the cold corridor that led to the forgotten wing. On the way, Mrs. Greaves spoke without looking at her. "You will keep your head down now." Eleanor's voice was barely audible. "Yes, ma'am." "You will follow the schedule exactly." "Yes, ma'am." "You will not speak unless necessary." "Yes, ma'am." "And when Lady Cromer asks again, you will sign." Eleanor's stomach turned, but she managed, "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves paused at the heavy door, keys clinking. "Do you still have the paper?" Eleanor's heart jumped. "What paper, ma'am?" Mrs. Greaves's gaze sharpened. "Do not play clever, the statement." "No, ma'am. Lady Cromer kept it." Mrs. Greaves studied her, then unlocked the door and pushed it open. Inside, the room felt different. Edmund sat by the window now, though the curtains remained drawn. He was not sleeping. His posture was rigid, as if he had been holding himself upright by force. He turned his head at the sound of the door. His eyes landed on Eleanor. Not vague, not dulled, sharp. He had been waiting. Mrs. Greaves spoke briskly, too briskly. "He has been restless. You will tidy and keep him calm." Edmund's gaze did not leave Eleanor. "They took you," he said. Eleanor swallowed. "Yes, sir." Mrs. Greaves snapped, "No talk." Edmund's eyes flicked to Mrs. Greaves with something like contempt. "No talk," he repeated, as if savouring the absurdity. Mrs. Greaves turned to Eleanor. "You know what to do. Supper at 6, tonic at 8, no deviation." Eleanor nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves hesitated, then said in a lower voice, "Remember what I told you." Then she left, locking the door behind her. Eleanor stood still for a moment, feeling the silence close around her again. Edmund spoke first. "What did they do to you?" Eleanor forced herself to move. She went to the table and began to straighten the tea things that were already straight, because her hands needed something to do. "They scolded me," she said. Edmund's jaw tightened. "Scolded? That is a gentle word." Eleanor's throat tightened. "They made me read something." Edmund's eyes narrowed. "Read? A statement," Eleanor said quietly. "To sign." Edmund leaned forward slightly. "What statement?" Eleanor's hands paused over a cup. She did not want to tell him, not because she distrusted him, because she could feel the walls listening as he had warned. She kept her voice low. "That I caused trouble here." A harsh breath left Edmund. He looked away, staring at the curtain as if it offended him. "They will blame you for my breathing if it suits them," he said. Eleanor swallowed. "They said I was chosen because I am harmless." Edmund's gaze snapped back to her. Harmless. Eleanor's cheeks burned. Unnoticed. Forgettable. Edmund's mouth twisted. "They always choose the ones they can discard." Eleanor's fingers tightened on the cloth. "They want me to sign so they may discard me properly." Edmund's eyes were bright. "Do not." Eleanor looked up. "Sir, do not sign," he said again, voice low but steady. "If you sign, you belong to their lie." Eleanor's chest tightened. "If I do not sign, I may lose my position." Edmund's jaw clenched. "Then leave. Go back to polishing trays and pretending the palace is clean." The words came sharp like a slap. Eleanor froze, Edmund's eyes flashed, and for a moment she saw regret there, almost immediately swallowed. He looked away, voice rough. "You should not be here." Eleanor's hands trembled. "Do you want me to go?" Edmund did not answer at once. His shoulders rose and fell. Then, very quietly, he said, "Yes." It hurt more than Eleanor expected. The sting was immediate and foolish. She told herself it was only because she had already been made to feel small upstairs, and now he had made her smaller again. She forced her hands to keep moving. "All right, sir," she said, making her voice flat. "I will do my work and keep out of your way." Edmund's gaze flicked to her, startled by her obedience. Then he looked down at his hands, as if ashamed of them. Eleanor moved to the sideboard, setting things in order. Her mind ran in circles around the same thought. He is not cruel, he is afraid. She poured tea, not because it was time, because it was something ordinary she could offer without asking permission. She set the cup on the small table near his chair and stepped back. Edmund stared at it. "You are stubborn," he said. "I am employed," Eleanor replied, keeping her tone mild. He gave a short, bitter breath. "Employment is another kind of chain." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Chains can be loosened." Edmund's eyes lifted to hers. "Not here." A pause. Eleanor chose her words carefully. "Why do you think they listen?" Edmund's gaze shifted to the door. "Because silence is their religion." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Then I will speak less." Edmund's eyes narrowed, as if he had not expected that. "You should speak none." Eleanor's mouth tightened. "I must speak enough to do my work." Edmund's jaw clenched. "And you must not be seen. You must not be remembered. You must not become involved." Involved. The word landed with weight. Eleanor swallowed. "You say that like you know what happens to people who are." Edmund's gaze stayed on the curtain. "I have watched it." Eleanor's fingers curled around the edge of the tray. "Who?" Edmund's throat worked. For a moment, he seemed to fight with himself. Then he spoke, and his voice softened as if the memory scraped him raw. "A governess," he said. "A long time ago. She tried to teach me Latin when I was still permitted sunlight. She spoke kindly. She asked questions. Then one day she was gone." Eleanor's chest tightened. "What happened to her?" Edmund's eyes closed briefly. "They said she married. They said she moved to the country. They said many things. The only truth was that she never came back." Eleanor's hands went cold. "Do you think she was punished?" Edmund opened his eyes. They were steady now and tired. I think she was inconvenient. Eleanor swallowed. And you think I will become inconvenient? Edmund's voice sharpened again, protective in a harsh way. You already have. Eleanor's pulse thudded. She tried to keep her face calm. Because I offered bread. Because you delayed, Edmund corrected. Because you asked if I felt worse. Because you looked at me as if I could answer. Eleanor's throat tightened. You can answer. Edmund's mouth twitched with something like pain. Not in a way they allow. Eleanor took a slow breath. Then answer me now, in a way you choose. Edmund stared at her. The room seemed to hold still. What do you want, Eleanor? He asked, voice low. Eleanor's mouth went dry at her name on his tongue. She forced herself not to show it. I want, she said carefully, to understand what makes you afraid of the windows. Edmund's gaze snapped to the curtains. His breathing quickened. Eleanor lifted a hand slightly, palm open, as if showing she would not move. I will not look. I promised. Edmund's jaw clenched. Promises are thin. Eleanor nodded. Then I will not ask again. Edmund's eyes stayed on the curtain as if it might move on its own. After a long moment he spoke, voice rough. They used to take me out, he said. To be seen. To be displayed. Eleanor's chest tightened. Displayed. They would stand me near a window, Edmund continued, the words coming with effort. So people could watch me from the gardens, like a creature behind glass. And when I did not smile properly or bow properly, they said it proved what they wanted it to prove. Eleanor's fingers dug into her palm. That you were unwell. Edmund's mouth tightened. That I was unsuitable. Eleanor's throat tightened. You were a boy. Edmund's eyes flicked to her, bright with contained emotion. Yes, the single word held years inside it. Eleanor swallowed. I am sorry. Edmund's gaze dropped. Do not be. Sorrow is another kind of attention. Eleanor's chest ached. She kept her voice quiet. Then I will give you something else. Edmund looked up, wary. What? Eleanor moved to the small shelf where a few books sat, dusty but neatly arranged. She had noticed them yesterday and wondered why they were there if no one meant him to read. She took one carefully. The cover was worn. I can read a little, she said, if you want. Edmund stared at the book as if it were a foreign object. They do not read to me. I know, Eleanor said softly. His jaw tightened. Why would you? Eleanor hesitated, then said the truth that was safest. Because it passes time. Edmund's gaze held hers. Time does not pass here. It collects. Eleanor's throat tightened. Then let me help it move. A long pause. Edmund leaned back, closing his eyes halfway. Read, he said, as if granting permission was a burden. Eleanor sat in the chair by the table, not too close to him. She opened the book and scanned the first lines, lips moving silently for a moment as she found the rhythm. Then she read aloud, voice quiet, careful. Her reading was not elegant. She stumbled once, corrected herself, continued. She did not apologize each time. She simply kept going because she sensed apologies would irritate him more than mistakes. After a few minutes, Edmund's breathing steadied. Eleanor continued. When she reached the bottom of a page, Edmund spoke without opening his eyes. Stop, Eleanor froze. Did I? Stop, he repeated, and there was something tight in his voice. Eleanor closed the book gently. Yes, sir. Edmund's eyes opened. He stared at her, and the calm in him looked fragile, like thin glass. You should not do that, he said. Read? Eleanor asked, confused. Make things bearable, he said, and his voice roughened. It makes it harder when they take it away. Eleanor's throat tightened. I cannot promise they will not try. Edmund's gaze sharpened. Then promise you will leave. Eleanor's chest tightened. Why do you want me to leave? His mouth twisted. Because if you stay, they will punish you, and I will have caused it. Eleanor swallowed. You did not summon me. Edmund's eyes flashed. I did not push you away fast enough. Eleanor's cheeks warmed. You tried. Edmund's jaw clenched. And you are still here. Eleanor's hands folded in her lap. Yes. Edmund stared at her for a long moment, then looked away, as if the sight of her steadiness offended him. You think you understand, he said. I think, Eleanor replied, voice low, "that you have been alone too long." Edmund's shoulders tightened. "Alone is safe." Eleanor's chest tightened. "Alone is also cruel." His gaze snapped to her. For a moment, his expression hardened, and Eleanor braced herself for anger. But the anger did not come. Something else came instead. Something like exhaustion. "You do not know what you are stepping into," Edmund said quietly. Eleanor's fingers curled. "Then tell me." Edmund's mouth tightened. "I cannot. Not without making it real." Eleanor swallowed. "It is already real." A pause. Edmund looked at the locked door, then back at Eleanor, and his voice dropped until it was almost a whisper. "They want me quiet, because quiet men do not contradict." Eleanor's breath caught. "Contradict what, sir?" Edmund's jaw tightened. "The story they tell." Eleanor felt the torn paper hidden in her apron seam again, like a heartbeat against her skin. She wanted to pull it out and show him, to say, "I found this. I know they are doing it on purpose." But she remembered his warning. They listen. So she did not. Instead, she stood. "It is nearly time for supper," she said, because routine was safer than truth. Edmund's gaze followed her movements as she prepared the tray. He looked like a man watching someone build a small shelter in a storm. When Millie slid the supper tray in through the crack, Eleanor retrieved it and set it on the table. She served Edmund a modest portion. He ate a few bites, then pushed the plate away. Eleanor did not scold him. She only said, "Will you have a little more bread, sir?" Edmund shook his head. Eleanor nodded and began clearing. A knock came at the door. Eleanor's shoulders tightened. Mrs. Greaves's voice sharp. "Open!" Eleanor opened the door. Mrs. Greaves stepped in, eyes scanning. "He ate?" "A little," Eleanor said. Mrs. Greaves's gaze narrowed. "And did you follow the schedule?" Eleanor's mouth went dry. She could answer truthfully and invite punishment, or she could lie and betray herself. "Yes, ma'am," she said, because today she could not afford another confrontation in this room. Mrs. Greaves's eyes lingered on Eleanor's face as if trying to detect deceit. Then she nodded once. "Good," she said. "Lady Cromere has sent the statement again. You will sign it tonight." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "Tonight?" Mrs. Greaves pulled a folded paper from her pocket and set it on the table. Then she placed a pen beside it, along with a small inkwell. Edmund's gaze flicked to the paper, then to Eleanor. Mrs. Greaves spoke briskly, as if embarrassed by the task. "You will sign, Eleanor, it is best." Eleanor's fingers curled at her sides. "Best for whom, ma'am?" Mrs. Greaves's eyes flashed. "Do not start." Eleanor's voice shook. "It says I caused agitation." Mrs. Greaves lifted her chin. "Then do not cause it again." Eleanor's throat tightened. "It says I accept blame for future disturbances." Mrs. Greaves's mouth tightened. "Then keep things quiet and there will be no disturbances." Eleanor's chest tightened. "And if there are?" Mrs. Greaves's gaze sharpened. "Then you will have already admitted you are at fault." Edmund's voice cut in low. "So convenient." Mrs. Greaves flinched, then snapped, "Silence!" Edmund's eyes flashed. "That is all you know to ask for." Mrs. Greaves took a quick step toward him, then stopped herself as if remembering she could not be seen acting out of control in front of Eleanor. She turned her ire on Eleanor instead. "Sign it," Mrs. Greaves said, voice low and hard. "You will not win this." Eleanor's mouth went dry. She stared at the paper, as if it were a closed door she could not open without losing something. Mrs. Greaves leaned close to Eleanor's ear. "You think he is grateful. You think he will protect you. He cannot protect himself." Eleanor swallowed. "I do not ask him to." Mrs. Greaves straightened. "Then do not ask the palace either." Mrs. Greaves moved to the door. "I will return in 10 minutes. If it is not signed, you will pack your things tonight." The lock clicked again. The door shut. The key turned. Eleanor stood very still. Edmund's gaze was fixed on her, and there was something fierce in it now, cutting through the dullness the tonics tried to lay over him. "Do not sign," he said. Eleanor's throat tightened. "If I do not, I will be dismissed." Edmund's jaw clenched. "Then go." Eleanor's eyes stung. "You keep telling me that." "Because you are in danger," Edmund said, voice rough. "And you do not understand what danger means here." Eleanor's hands trembled. It means being hungry. It means sleeping under a stair. It means never being hired again. Edmund stared at her. That is only the beginning. Eleanor's breath caught. What else? Edmund's gaze flicked to the ceiling, to the walls, to the door. The palace does not like loose threads, he said quietly. Loose threads unravel tapestries. Eleanor's stomach turned. Edmund's voice softened, and that softness was more frightening than his harshness. They will make you say you lied. They will make you say you tempted me. They will make you say you wanted attention, and because you are a maid, everyone will nod as if it is reasonable. Eleanor's chest tightened. She looked down at the paper. Her name had not been written yet, but she could see it there, waiting like a stain. She whispered, "What should I do?" Edmund's jaw clenched. "Leave before you are caught in their story." Eleanor's fingers curled. "And you?" Edmund's gaze dropped, and for a moment the loneliness in him was so plain it made Eleanor's throat ache. "I have been caught for years," he said. Eleanor swallowed hard. "Then perhaps I should not abandon you to it." Edmund's head snapped up. "Do not say that." Eleanor held his gaze. "Why not?" "Because it will make you brave," Edmund said, and his voice broke on the last word, as if he despised the idea. "And brave people do not last here." Eleanor's hands moved toward the pen on the table. Her heart hammered. She picked it up. The feathered tip trembled above the paper. Eleanor stared at the words again, forcing herself to read each line, each trap, each neat sentence meant to tidy human suffering into polite ink. She heard Edmund's breathing, tight and controlled. She dipped the pen into the ink. She lifted it again. And in the doorway just outside the chain's reach, a man stood watching with quiet satisfaction, his posture perfectly composed, his gaze fixed on Eleanor's hand, as if he were witnessing a contract being sealed. Lord Rivenhall. Eleanor's hand froze above the paper. Lord Rivenhall did not step into the room. He did not need to. His presence at the crack of the door was enough, like a seal pressed into wax. His voice was mild. "Miss Hart." Eleanor's throat tightened. She lowered the pen slowly, careful not to spill ink, as if a stain would be the worst thing that could happen. "My lord," she said, because that was what one said when a man like him spoke your name. Edmund's head lifted. His eyes sharpened in an instant, as if the fog inside him recoiled from danger. "Ah," Edmund murmured. "So the architect arrives." Rivenhall's smile did not change. "Your Highness, how good to see you upright." Edmund's jaw clenched. "Do not use that word in here, you do not mean it." Rivenhall's gaze drifted to Eleanor's hand, then to the statement on the table. "Have you signed, Miss Hart?" Eleanor's fingers tightened around the pen. "No, my lord." Rivenhall tilted his head. "Why not?" Eleanor swallowed. "Because it is not true." Rivenhall's eyebrows lifted, faintly amused. "Truth is expensive in this building. Are you certain you can afford it?" Edmund's voice cut in, low and dangerous without being loud. "Leave her." Rivenhall's eyes slid to Edmund. "I am only ensuring the household runs smoothly." Edmund's mouth twisted. "You mean quietly?" Rivenhall let that pass, as if it were a child's complaint. He looked back to Eleanor. "You are new. You will learn. If you insist on resisting basic instruction, you will be removed." Eleanor's stomach dropped, but she kept her face steady. "Yes, my lord." Rivenhall's tone stayed pleasant. "Removed without a reference. That is a long road for a young woman." Eleanor heard her own voice, thin but clear. "Then I will walk it." A flicker crossed Rivenhall's expression. Not anger. Interest. Edmund stared at Eleanor, as if he could not decide whether to be furious with her or grateful. Rivenhall's gaze returned to the paper. "Sign, it is a simple thing." Eleanor's fingers loosened from the pen. She set it down gently. "No, my lord." Silence snapped tight. Rivenhall stared at her for a long moment, then smiled again, slower. "You have courage." Eleanor did not answer. Rivenhall's voice softened, almost kindly. "Or you have pride. Pride is common in girls who have not yet suffered for it." Edmund's jaw tightened. "Stop speaking to her." Rivenhall's eyes flicked to Edmund. "It is touching that you care." Edmund's face went still. "Do not pretend you know what touching is." Rivenhall gave a small nod, as if acknowledging a minor inconvenience. "Very well. Miss Hart, you will find your choices have consequences. Good evening." He stepped back. The door closed. The lock turned. Eleanor stood, heart pounding. Edmund's voice came tight. "You should have signed." Eleanor turned toward him. "You told me not to." "I told you to leave," Edmund snapped. Then lower, rougher, "I told you to leave because I knew he would come." Eleanor's hands curled at her sides. "Then you knew they were using me." Edmund looked away. "They use everyone," Eleanor swallowed. "I will not be used against you." Edmund's laugh was a bitter breath. "You already are." A knock came at the door. Mrs. Greaves's voice, sharp. "Open." Eleanor's spine stiffened. Mrs. Greaves entered, face tight. She looked at the paper on the table, then at Eleanor's empty hand. "It is not signed," Mrs. Greaves said. Eleanor kept her voice even. "No, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves's cheeks flushed. "Lady Cromere will be furious." Eleanor's stomach turned. "I understand." Mrs. Greaves glared. "Do you? Do you truly?" Edmund spoke, low. "Do not shout at her." Mrs. Greaves swung toward him. "I am not shouting." Edmund's eyes narrowed. "You are trembling. That is worse." Mrs. Greaves's mouth tightened. She turned back to Eleanor. "Pack your things." Eleanor's breath caught. "Tonight?" "Yes." Mrs. Greaves snatched up the paper. "Now, before Lady Cromere decides to make an example." Edmund's jaw clenched. "Let her be." Mrs. Greaves's voice sharpened. "He is not your concern, Eleanor. Your concern is surviving." Eleanor swallowed. "If I leave now, who will—" Mrs. Greaves cut her off. "Someone else. Someone who signs." Edmund's voice went flat. "Someone who will not offer bread." Mrs. Greaves flinched, then recovered. "It is not your place to comment." Edmund leaned forward slightly, eyes bright. "Nothing in here is my place, apparently." Mrs. Greaves snapped at Eleanor. "Move!" Eleanor's hands trembled, but she nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She turned toward the small cupboard where her spare apron and shawl were kept. She began to fold them with careful hands. Edmund watched her. His gaze held a tightness Eleanor could not name. When Eleanor reached for her shawl, Edmund said quietly, "You are doing it." Eleanor paused. "Doing what, sir?" "Leaving," he said, and his voice was rough with something he did not want to show. Eleanor's throat tightened. "I was told to." Edmund's jaw clenched. "You always do what you are told." Eleanor stared at him, stunned by the accusation. Mrs. Greaves snapped, "Do not speak. Pack." Eleanor forced herself to continue folding, but the torn paper hidden in her apron seam pressed against her skin like a secret that demanded breath. Increased dosage. Ensure silence. Eleanor's mind raced. If she left, that paper would go with her. It might be the only thing she had that proved anything. But if she left, Edmund would be alone again, managed again, quieted again. She took a slow breath. "Ma'am," Eleanor said softly, "may I speak to Lady Cromere directly?" Mrs. Greaves stared as if Eleanor had asked to address the Queen. "No?" Eleanor swallowed. "Then may I at least finish tonight's duties before I go?" "For the sake of order." Mrs. Greaves's eyes narrowed. "You are bargaining." Eleanor lowered her gaze, making herself look smaller. "I'm being practical. If I depart in the middle of the evening, who will do the work? Millie?" Mrs. Greaves's mouth tightened at the mention of Millie. "Millie is useless." Eleanor held her tone steady. "Then let me finish. You can send me away at dawn." Mrs. Greaves hesitated. She glanced at Edmund, then at the clock. "Fine," she snapped. "But you will not touch the cabinet. You will not change anything. You will keep him quiet, and you will go at dawn." Eleanor's chest loosened by a thread. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves pointed a finger at her. "And if Lady Cromere asks again, you will sign." Eleanor bowed her head. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves left, locking the door. When the lock clicked, Eleanor turned to Edmund. He stared at her, expression guarded. "Why did you do that?" Eleanor's voice was quiet. "Because I am not ready to leave." Edmund's eyes narrowed. "That is not an answer." Eleanor swallowed. "It is the only one I can say out loud." Edmund's gaze flicked to the walls. "They listen." "I know," Eleanor whispered. "So I will speak carefully." Edmund's jaw clenched. "Careful will not save you." Eleanor moved to the table and gathered the tea things, hands steadying as she did familiar tasks. "Sir," she said softly, "when you were clearer today, you said they want you quiet, Because quiet men do not contradict. Edmund's gaze fixed on her. Do not. Eleanor kept her voice low. What do you contradict? Edmund's fingers tightened on the chair arm. A story. What story? Edmund's breathing quickened. He looked away. Stop. Eleanor's chest tightened, but she held herself still. All right, I will stop. A pause. Then Edmund spoke again, so quietly she almost missed it. There was a night. Eleanor's heart thudded. She did not move. She did not encourage with her face. She simply waited. Edmund's eyes remained on the curtain. A corridor, voices, and someone said I was in the way. Eleanor whispered, You were never in the way. Edmund's mouth tightened. They said I was. Eleanor swallowed. Who? Edmund's jaw clenched. I cannot. Eleanor nodded quickly. Then don't name them. Only tell me what you remember. Edmund's breathing steadied with effort. A door. A private door. Eleanor's pulse quickened. In the palace? Edmund's gaze snapped to her. Do not ask questions like that. Eleanor lowered her eyes. Forgive me. Edmund's voice softened by a fraction. You are too alive for this place. Eleanor's throat tightened at the strange tenderness of it. A knock came at the door. Millie's voice, thin. Miss Hart? Mrs. Greaves said to bring fresh candles. Eleanor moved to open the door enough to take the candles. Millie kept her eyes down. As Eleanor took them, Millie whispered, barely moving her lips. Lady Cromere is angry. Eleanor kept her expression blank. Thank you. Millie hesitated, then whispered again. They're saying you think you're better. Eleanor's stomach turned. Who is saying it? Millie's eyes flicked up, frightened. Everyone. Eleanor forced a small nod. Go on, Millie. Millie hurried away. Eleanor closed the door and set the candles down, lighting them with steady hands. Edmund watched her. They will turn the servants against you. Eleanor's mouth tightened. They already have. Edmund's gaze sharpened. You should still leave. Eleanor met his eyes. Not yet. Edmund's jaw clenched. Stubborn. Yes, Eleanor said quietly. And you are still here too. Something flickered in Edmund's face, and for a moment the hard mask slipped. Loneliness showed through, raw and unadorned. Then it vanished. Do your work, he said, voice rough. I am, Eleanor answered. When 8 o'clock approached, Eleanor felt the time like a tightening rope. Mrs. Greaves would come. The tonic would come. The schedule would press down again. Sure enough, the lock clicked. Mrs. Greaves entered with the tonic tray, face stern. Time. Edmund's shoulders tightened. Eleanor stepped forward with the bread plate already prepared. A little bread first, ma'am. It settles him. Mrs. Greaves glared. Do not start again. Eleanor lowered her eyes. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Greaves thrust the glass toward Edmund. Drink. Edmund stared at it. His hand trembled. Eleanor kept her voice low. Sir, a little bread might help. Edmund's eyes flicked to her, then to the glass. Then, with visible effort, he took the tonic and swallowed. Mrs. Greaves snatched the glass away. Good. Edmund's eyes closed briefly. His jaw clenched, as if holding himself together. Mrs. Greaves turned to Eleanor. Lady Cromere expects your answer at dawn. Eleanor nodded. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Greaves lingered a moment, gaze narrowing on Eleanor. And do not go rummaging through papers. Eleanor's heart lurched. She kept her face blank. No, ma'am. Mrs. Greaves left. The door locked. Eleanor stood still, hands clasped so tightly her fingers ached. She suspects. Edmund's voice was thick. Of course she does. Eleanor swallowed. I found something. Edmund's eyes opened, sharper than the tonic wanted them to be. What? Eleanor glanced at the walls. Then she spoke with careful vagueness. A line. Written. It said to make you quiet. Edmund's mouth tightened. That is not news. It said to increase, Eleanor whispered. Edmund's eyes flashed, then dulled again as the medicine settled. They always increase. Eleanor's stomach turned. If I could show someone... Edmund's voice came slow. Someone like Rivenhall? Someone like Crichton? They are the same hand. Eleanor swallowed. Then who? Edmund's gaze drifted toward the door. A guard, he murmured. Not Greaves, not Pell. a man who still remembers shame. Eleanor's mind leapt to the captain she had glimpsed once in the corridor outside the servants' hall. "Captain Hale," she whispered. Edmund's eyelids fluttered. "Yes, him." Eleanor's heart pounded. "How do you know him?" Edmund's mouth tightened. "He once looked at me as if I was not a rumor, a small thing. But in this place, small things mattered." Eleanor took a slow breath. "Then I will speak to him." Edmund's gaze snapped to her. "No." Eleanor's voice stayed steady. "Sir, if I leave tomorrow, I may never be allowed near you again." Edmund's jaw clenched. "And if you speak, you may never be allowed anywhere again." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I would rather risk my position than leave you with no one." Edmund stared at her, and his voice dropped, almost pleading. "Do not make me responsible for your ruin." Eleanor's eyes stung. "You are not responsible for their cruelty." Edmund looked away. "It feels the same." Eleanor swallowed hard. "Then let me carry some of it." Edmund's breath shook. "You cannot." Eleanor's voice softened. "Watch me." The words came out before she could stop them. They sounded too bold, too intimate. Edmund's head turned, his eyes fixed on her with a sudden clarity that made Eleanor's heart stumble. "Eleanor," he said, and her name on his tongue was quiet devastation. "You do not know what you are offering." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I am offering, not abandoning you." Edmund's jaw clenched. "That is the most dangerous thing you can do." A pause. Then, barely audible, Edmund said, "Thank you." The words were simple. They were everything. The next morning came too quickly. Eleanor was sent to scrub steps in the servants' corridor before she could even bring Edmund his tea. Mrs. Greaves made certain she was seen working, bent over, hands red, as if to remind her where she belonged. In the servants' hall, whispers followed her like smoke. "There she is. Thinks she can change the schedule. Thinks she can talk to him like a parlor guest." Eleanor kept her head down. She did not answer. She scrubbed until the stone looked the same as it always had, because stone did not confess anything, no matter how hard you rubbed. When she carried a pail back toward the wing, she saw Captain Hale at the bend of the corridor, speaking with a younger guard. He was tall, composed, his uniform neat. His eyes moved over the hallway with quiet attention, as if he heard what others ignored. Eleanor's heart pounded. She could not walk up to him like a child tugging a sleeve. That would be noticed, so she did the only thing she could. She stumbled. Not dramatically, just enough. The pail sloshed. A little water spilled onto the stone. "Careful," the younger guard muttered. Eleanor bent quickly as if mortified. "Forgive me." Captain Hale stepped closer, not unkind. "Are you all right?" Eleanor kept her eyes down. "Yes, sir. Just clumsy." Captain Hale's gaze lingered on her face. "You are Eleanor Hart." Eleanor's breath caught. "Yes, sir." The fact that he knew her name frightened her more than it comforted her. Captain Hale lowered his voice slightly. "You were assigned to the North Wing." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the pail handle. "Yes, sir." Captain Hale's expression stayed neutral. "That is difficult work." Eleanor swallowed. "Yes, sir." The younger guard shifted, impatient. "Captain, we must—" Captain Hale lifted a hand slightly, and the younger guard fell quiet. Captain Hale looked at Eleanor. His voice remained calm. "If you need something carried, you may ask." It was an offer, carefully worded, safe. Eleanor's throat tightened. She could not hand him the torn paper in the corridor. She could not speak plainly. So she said the most ordinary words she could shape into a message. "Thank you, sir," Eleanor said softly. "There is a cupboard in that wing that troubles me." Captain Hale's eyes sharpened for half a second, then smoothed again. "A cupboard?" "Yes, sir," Eleanor said, voice steady with effort. "Locked, often opened. And when it is opened, the prince seems worse." Captain Hale's gaze held hers. "Who opens it?" Eleanor swallowed. "A physician, and sometimes others." Captain Hale's jaw tightened slightly. "Be careful, Miss Hart." Eleanor nodded. "I am trying, sir." Captain Hale's voice softened by a fraction. "If you have concerns, you may speak to Mrs. Greaves." Eleanor's mouth tightened. "Mrs. Greaves is not fond of concerns." Captain Hale studied her a moment longer. Then he said quietly, "If you must speak, choose the hour when corridors are empty." Eleanor's pulse quickened. Yes, sir. Captain Hale stepped back. Go on. Eleanor moved away, pail in hand, heart hammering with the fragile relief of having placed the smallest pebble in the right path. But relief did not last in this palace. It never did. When Eleanor reached the heavy door of the wing, Mrs. Greaves met her, eyes sharp. You are late, Mrs. Greaves said. I was delayed with chores, ma'am. Mrs. Greaves's gaze narrowed. And you were speaking with Captain Hale? Eleanor's stomach dropped. She kept her voice steady. He spoke to me, ma'am. Mrs. Greaves's lips pressed together. You are being watched. Eleanor nodded. I understand. Mrs. Greaves unlocked the door. Go in. Do not chatter, and do not let him chatter. Inside, Edmund sat by the table, hands clasped. He looked up when Eleanor entered, and for a moment Eleanor saw something like relief before he forced his face still. Mrs. Greaves muttered, tea, then tidy, then no nonsense. She left. Eleanor brought Edmund his tea. He took a sip, then set the cup down, eyes fixed on Eleanor. You came back. Eleanor's throat tightened. Yes, sir. I expected you to be gone, Edmund said quietly. Eleanor's hands trembled. I nearly was. Edmund's jaw clenched. Did you sign? Eleanor shook her head. No. Edmund exhaled a harsh breath. Then you are foolish. Eleanor met his gaze. Then so be it. Edmund stared at her as if something inside him had shifted, and he did not know what to do with it. Eleanor lowered her voice. I spoke to Captain Hale. Edmund's eyes widened slightly. Why would you? Because I cannot leave you alone with that cupboard, Eleanor whispered. Because if they remove me tomorrow, there must be someone else who knows to look. Edmund's jaw clenched. You will be punished. Eleanor's mouth tightened. I already am. The day unfolded like a tightening net. Mrs. Greaves checked the room twice instead of once. Millie arrived with supplies and hovered too long, eyes darting as if someone had told her to listen. At noon, Dr. Crichton appeared unexpectedly, smiling as if visiting a pleasant patient. How is our prince today? He asked the heir. Edmund's fingers tightened. Eleanor kept her gaze down. Dr. Crichton's eyes flicked to her apron, lingering near her waist seam. Eleanor's pulse spiked. What is that? Dr. Crichton asked mildly. Eleanor's mouth went dry. My apron, sir. Dr. Crichton smiled. Yes. And what is inside it? Eleanor forced a small, confused look. Nothing, sir. Dr. Crichton took a step closer. Nothing tends to make servants nervous. Eleanor's throat tightened. I am nervous because you are the physician, sir. Dr. Crichton's smile widened slightly. Clever. Edmund's voice cut in low. Leave her alone. Dr. Crichton's gaze slid to Edmund. Your Highness is protective today. Edmund's eyes flashed. Do not speak as if you know me. Dr. Crichton's voice remained polite. Drink when instructed. Rest when instructed. Speak when permitted. Edmund's jaw clenched. I am not a clock. Dr. Crichton's eyes returned to Eleanor. If you are found interfering again, Miss Hart, you will be removed immediately. Eleanor lowered her gaze. Yes, sir. Dr. Crichton lingered a moment longer, then left. When the door locked behind him, Eleanor's hands began to shake. Edmund watched her. He suspects, Eleanor whispered. Yes. Edmund's voice was rough. Then hide whatever you have. Eleanor swallowed. I already have. Edmund's gaze sharpened. Where? Eleanor shook her head slightly. I cannot say. Edmund's jaw clenched, then eased. Good. That night after supper, when the palace quieted and the corridor outside the wing grew still, Eleanor heard a soft knock at the door. Not Mrs. Greaves, not Dr. Crichton. A pause. Then a second knock, spaced in a careful pattern. Eleanor's heart pounded. She moved to the door, fingers trembling as she slid the chain aside just enough to see. Captain Hale stood in the dim corridor, face calm. Eleanor's breath caught. Captain. Captain Hale's voice was low. You said a cupboard troubles you. Eleanor swallowed. Yes, sir. Captain Hale's gaze flicked toward the lock, then back to her. I cannot enter, but I can listen. Eleanor's fingers shook as she reached into the seam of her apron. She pulled out the folded scrap and held it between two fingers through the crack of the door. Captain Hale's eyes tightened as he read. Increased dosage. ensure silence. His jaw clenched. "Where did you find this?" Eleanor whispered. "Under a tray." Captain Hale's voice stayed calm, but something harder entered it. "Keep it hidden. Do not show it to anyone else." Eleanor nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Captain Hale hesitated. "Has he spoken of anything unusual?" Eleanor's stomach tightened. "He speaks of a night. A corridor, a private door." Captain Hale's gaze sharpened. "A door?" Eleanor nodded. "And he fears the windows. He says they used to display him." Captain Hale's mouth tightened. "I have heard rumors." Eleanor whispered. "Rumors can kill, sir," quietly. Captain Hale held her gaze. "Be careful. You are being watched more than you know." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Then what can I do?" Captain Hale's voice lowered further. "If you learn anything specific, anything that can be verified, tell me. Not in words. In something written, if you can. Something that cannot be denied." Eleanor nodded, pulse hammering. "Yes, sir." Captain Hale stepped back. "Good night, Miss Hart." Eleanor closed the chain and stood for a moment with her hand pressed to the wood, breathing hard. Edmund's voice came from behind her, low. "Who was that?" Eleanor turned. Edmund's eyes were sharp with suspicion and fear. Eleanor whispered, "A guard who does not like injustice." Edmund's jaw tightened. "No one here dislikes it. They only dislike being caught." Eleanor's chest tightened. He read the line. Edmund's gaze sharpened. "What line?" Eleanor swallowed. "The one about increasing the dosage." Edmund's face went still. For a moment he looked like a man hearing his own sentence read aloud. Then he murmured, "Of course." Eleanor stepped closer, voice low. "Sir, you must tell me anything you remember. Anything that can be proven." Edmund's jaw clenched. "I cannot." Eleanor's eyes stung. "You can. Even a name." Edmund's gaze flicked to the walls. "Do you want them to hear my name on your lips?" Eleanor swallowed. "Then whisper it." "I will not repeat it here." Edmund stared at her for a long moment, then looked away as if ashamed of needing her. "Rivenhall," he said, barely audible. Eleanor's breath caught. "My lord." Edmund's mouth tightened. He was there, not always in the room, but always near, like a man waiting for a door to open. Eleanor's stomach turned. "Why?" Edmund's voice roughened. "Because he wanted something from my silence." Eleanor swallowed. "What?" Edmund's eyes closed. His brow furrowed with effort. "A signature." Eleanor's pulse spiked. "A signature on what?" Edmund's breathing quickened. "I do not know. I never saw it, but they asked. Again and again. When I refused, they called me unstable." Eleanor's throat tightened. "And then they isolated you." Edmund nodded once, almost imperceptible. Eleanor's mind raced. A signature, a document, a reason to keep him drugged and hidden. She felt the palace's machinery behind it, smooth and merciless. The next day, the trap sprang in a new way. Lord Rivenhall appeared in the corridor outside the wing at midday, as if he had business there, as if it were normal for him to stroll so close to the locked door. Mrs. Greaves stood with him, posture stiff. Millie hovered behind, eyes down. Rivenhall's gaze landed on Eleanor when she opened the door for supplies. He smiled. "Miss Hart." Eleanor's stomach tightened. "My lord." Rivenhall's voice was pleasant. "Walk with me." Eleanor's breath caught. "My duties." Rivenhall's smile did not change. "I have already spoken to Mrs. Greaves." Mrs. Greaves's face was tight and unreadable. Eleanor's heart pounded. She could not refuse a man like that in the corridor. Refusal was a spark. Sparks were noticed. She stepped out, closing the door behind her, chain still secured from the inside. Her hand lingered on the wood a moment longer than necessary, and she felt it like leaving someone behind in a storm. Rivenhall walked at an unhurried pace. Eleanor followed half a step behind as etiquette demanded. He spoke softly, as if sharing confidences. "You have made an impression." Eleanor kept her eyes down. "I am sorry, my lord." "Do not be," he said. "Impressions can be useful." Eleanor's mouth went dry. "Useful to whom, my lord?" Rivenhall gave a small chuckle. "To people who wish to help you." Eleanor's stomach turned. "Help me." Rivenhall stopped near a window alcove. Servants passed at the far end of the corridor, but no one lingered close. It was as if the palace itself knew to give him space. Rivenhall turned slightly toward Eleanor. "You are in a precarious position." Eleanor clasped her hands. "Yes, my lord. You refused to sign," Rivenhall said, as if discussing the weather. "That is unfortunate." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I could not sign what was not true." Rivenhall's gaze held hers, calm. "Truth is flexible. Survival is not." Eleanor said nothing. Rivenhall's tone remained gentle. "You may be dismissed or you may remain." Eleanor's pulse hammered. "Remain." Rivenhall nodded. "Yes, with protection." Eleanor swallowed. "What protection, my lord?" Rivenhall's smile was small. "Mine." Eleanor's skin prickled. "Why would you protect me?" Rivenhall lifted his eyebrows faintly, as if she were slow. "Because you are close to him." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "My lord, I am only an attendant." Rivenhall's voice softened. "And he speaks to you." Eleanor's throat tightened. "He speaks sometimes." Rivenhall's gaze sharpened. "What does he say?" Eleanor's heart pounded hard enough to make her dizzy. Rivenhall leaned in slightly, polite, patient. "Does he mention names? Events? Old grievances?" Eleanor's fingers dug into her palms. Rivenhall's voice stayed kind. "I am not asking you to betray him. I am asking you to help the palace avoid misunderstandings. His Highness is vulnerable. He may invent stories. He may misremember. He may accuse those who have only ever served him." Eleanor's mouth went dry. "He is not inventing." Rivenhall's eyes narrowed a fraction. "How would you know?" Eleanor forced herself to speak carefully. "Because I have seen him calm. I have seen him frightened. I have seen him treated as if he were a nuisance. Those things are real, my lord." Rivenhall studied her, then sighed gently. "You are earnest." Eleanor did not answer. Rivenhall's tone warmed, falsely intimate. "Let me be plain. Tell me what he says, and I will ensure you keep your position. Better wages, better quarters, a reference that can open doors." Eleanor's stomach turned at the word doors. "And if I do not?" Eleanor asked quietly. Rivenhall's smile did not change. "Then you will be dismissed, quietly. No reference. And the next girl will be less principled." Eleanor's throat tightened. "You would do that?" Rivenhall's gaze was calm. "The palace does what it must." Eleanor swallowed hard. She thought of Edmund's eyes when he said, "Thank you." She thought of his voice, thick with medicine, warning her not to be caught in their story. She lifted her chin a fraction. "My lord, I cannot." Rivenhall's eyebrows rose slightly. "Cannot." Eleanor's voice shook, but it did not break. "I cannot repeat private words spoken in distress." Rivenhall's gaze hardened by a degree. "You are making an enemy of yourself." Eleanor's hands trembled. "I am only trying to do my work." Rivenhall's voice softened again, dangerous in its calm. "Your work is to keep him quiet. If you cannot do that, someone else will." Eleanor's chest tightened. "If he is quiet because he is drugged into silence, my lord, that is not care." Rivenhall's smile faded. "Be careful, Miss Hart." Eleanor swallowed. "Yes, my lord." Rivenhall stepped back, the conversation closing like a door. "Return to your duties." Eleanor curtsied and walked away, legs unsteady. When she reached the wing, her hand shook as she touched the door. Inside, Edmund sat rigidly, as if he had been holding himself together by will alone. He looked at her at once. "Where were you?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "In the corridor." "With whom?" Edmund demanded, and his voice held an edge of panic. Eleanor swallowed. "Lord Rivenhall." Edmund's face went white in a way Eleanor had not seen before. "What did he say to you?" Eleanor stepped closer, voice low. "He offered to protect me." Edmund's jaw clenched. "In exchange for what?" Eleanor met his eyes. "In exchange for your words." Edmund's shoulders tightened, and he looked away, breathing hard. "And you told him?" "No," Eleanor said quickly. "I refused." Edmund's head snapped back, his eyes burned. "You refused?" "Yes." A long pause. Then Edmund's voice came rough, almost broken. "Why?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "Because your words are yours, and because they are using you, sir. I cannot be part of it." Edmund stared at her as if he could not absorb it. Then he gave a short, harsh breath. "You are reckless." Eleanor's mouth tightened. "Perhaps." Edmund's jaw clenched. "He will not forgive that." Eleanor swallowed. "I know." Edmund's voice dropped. "Then you have just stepped into a war without weapons." Eleanor flinched at the word and whispered, "No weapons, sir. Only truth." Edmund's mouth twisted. "Truth is sharper than anything. That is why they dulled me." Eleanor took a slow breath. "Then we will not let them." "We." The word fell between them like a vow. Edmund looked at her, eyes bright. "Do not say we," Eleanor swallowed. "Why not?" "Because it makes me hope," Edmund said, and the honesty of it made Eleanor's chest ache. "And hope is what they punish." Eleanor's voice softened. "Then let them punish me for hoping. I am already marked." A knock came at the door. Mrs. Greaves entered with a new ledger tucked under her arm, and Dr. Crichton behind her, smiling faintly. "My goodness," Dr. Crichton said. "Our attendant looks flushed. Have you been running about, Miss Hart?" Eleanor kept her eyes down. "No, sir." Dr. Crichton's gaze lingered on her. "Do you find the work stressful?" Eleanor swallowed. "It is work, sir." Dr. Crichton stepped into the room and set the ledger on the table, flipping it open. His finger traced a line. Eleanor's eyes flicked to the page before she could stop them. The ink looked too fresh in places, the dates too neat. Dr. Crichton's voice was mild. "We will adjust the schedule again." Edmund's fingers tightened. Eleanor heard herself say softly, "Why?" Dr. Crichton's gaze snapped to her. "Why?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "He has been clearer." Dr. Crichton smiled, as if she had confirmed his suspicion. "And you enjoy that, do you?" Eleanor's cheeks burned. "I enjoy seeing him comfortable." Dr. Crichton's smile thinned. "Comfort is not the priority." Edmund's voice cut in low. "Then what is?" Dr. Crichton did not look at him. "Stability." Edmund's laugh was a bitter breath. "You mean obedience?" Dr. Crichton turned a page in the ledger. "Miss Hart, you will note the new times." Eleanor's heart pounded. The ledger lay open, close enough to read, close enough to see what was missing. She glanced at it, forcing herself to look only briefly, as if she were merely following orders. But she saw it, a torn edge where a page should have been, and on the remaining page, a line scratched out and rewritten, the ink darker than the rest. Eleanor's pulse spiked. "Sir," she said carefully, "this page looks—" Dr. Crichton's gaze fell on her with cold amusement. "Looks what?" Eleanor swallowed. "Looks altered." A sharp silence fell. Mrs. Greaves sucked in a breath. Edmund's head lifted, eyes bright, alarmed. Dr. Crichton's smile widened slightly. "Altered." Eleanor's hands trembled. "Perhaps I am mistaken, sir." Dr. Crichton tilted his head. "You are indeed mistaken, and you will stop looking at documents not meant for you." Eleanor lowered her eyes. "Yes, sir." Dr. Crichton closed the ledger with a soft thud. "Your Highness will take his medicine now." Edmund's jaw clenched. "No." Dr. Crichton's gaze remained calm. "Yes." Eleanor's heart hammered. She could feel the trap tightening again. Dr. Crichton poured the tonic. He held it out. Edmund's hand trembled, but he did not reach. Eleanor stepped forward, not touching the glass, only speaking low. "Sir, take a sip of water after. It may help." Edmund's gaze flicked to her, then back to the tonic. Slowly, with visible disgust, he took it and swallowed. Dr. Crichton nodded, satisfied. "Good." He turned to Eleanor. "You have a tendency to involve yourself. That will end." Eleanor lowered her gaze. "Yes, sir." Dr. Crichton and Mrs. Greaves left. When the lock clicked, Eleanor's hands began to shake in earnest. Edmund's voice came thick. "You should not have said altered." Eleanor swallowed. "I saw it." Edmund's jaw clenched. "Seeing is not allowed." Eleanor's chest tightened. "Then we must be smarter." Edmund stared at her. "Smarter?" Eleanor nodded, forcing steadiness. "If I can find proof, something written, something that shows the missing pages." Edmund's gaze sharpened. "They keep those things locked." Eleanor's mouth tightened. Locks can be opened. Edmund's eyes flicked to the door. Not by you, Eleanor whispered. By someone with keys. Edmund's breath caught. Greaves. Eleanor nodded slowly. Or Crichton. Or someone who cleans when they are careless. Edmund's voice was rough. They are never careless. Eleanor's mouth tightened. Everyone is careless when they believe you are nothing. The words hung between them, bitter and true. That evening, the palace's gaze grew heavier. Millie delivered candles and lingered, hands trembling, as if forced to wait for a question to be asked. Eleanor said quietly, "You may go, Millie." Millie's eyes flicked up, frightened. "Mrs. Greaves said to make sure you have enough." Eleanor kept her voice gentle. "We do." Millie hesitated, then whispered, "Lady Cromere asked about you again." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "What did you say?" Millie's voice trembled. "Nothing. I said I didn't know anything. I don't want trouble." Eleanor nodded, keeping her face calm. "You did right." Millie swallowed. "They said you were here after hours." Eleanor's pulse spiked. "I live here during my shift, Millie." Millie's eyes darted to Edmund, then away. "They mean alone." Eleanor's cheeks went hot. "Go, Millie." Millie fled. Edmund's voice came low. "They are building a scandal." Eleanor swallowed. "How can they?" Edmund's mouth tightened. "Because they can." Eleanor's hands trembled as she straightened the tea things again. "Then I will be more careful." Edmund's gaze sharpened. "Careful will not stop them." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Then what will?" Edmund stared at the table, voice rough. "Proof." Eleanor nodded. "Yes." The opportunity came when she least expected it. Near midnight, the lock clicked softly. Eleanor startled upright from the chair where she had been darning a hem. Edmund was half asleep, eyes heavy with medicine. The door opened, and Mrs. Greaves stepped in, face tight. "I forgot the ledger," Mrs. Greaves muttered, as if annoyed with herself. Eleanor's pulse spiked. The ledger, the missing pages. Mrs. Greaves crossed to the table where Dr. Crichton had left it earlier, tucked beneath another book. Eleanor kept her face blank, forcing her breathing to remain steady. Mrs. Greaves picked it up and flipped it open, frowning. He changed the times again. Eleanor's heart hammered. She could see the torn edge from where she stood. "Mrs. Greaves muttered, "Always changing, always increasing." Then, as if something occurred to her, Mrs. Greaves glanced at Edmund. "He awake?" she asked Eleanor. Eleanor swallowed. "No, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves's eyes narrowed. "And you?" Eleanor's mouth went dry. "I was mending, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves's gaze lingered on Eleanor. "You are too steady for a girl who refuses to sign." Eleanor forced a small, tired look. "I am only trying to keep my place, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves stared at her, then huffed. "Your place is leaving." She closed the ledger, tucked it under her arm, and moved toward the door. Eleanor's pulse pounded. If that ledger left the room, her chance might vanish. She heard herself speak softly. "Ma'am." Mrs. Greaves paused. "What?" Eleanor swallowed. May I see the schedule for tomorrow, so I do not make mistakes?" Mrs. Greaves glared. "Now you want to follow it." Eleanor lowered her gaze. "I do not wish to be scolded again." Mrs. Greaves's mouth tightened. She hesitated, then opened the ledger just enough to show a page. Eleanor leaned in slightly, eyes scanning fast, and there, on the lower margin, she saw a note written in a different hand. Not Dr. Crichton's. A sharper script. "Ensure compliance. If resistance continues, remove." Eleanor's breath caught. Mrs. Greaves snapped the ledger shut. "That is enough." Eleanor forced a nod. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves left and locked the door again. Eleanor stood frozen for a moment, heart hammering so hard she felt it in her throat. Edmund's voice came, thick with sleep. "What is it?" Eleanor swallowed, moving closer to him, lowering her voice. "There is a note, not his handwriting." Edmund's eyes opened a fraction. "Whose?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "I do not know, but it says, 'Remove.'" Edmund went still. Even through the medicine, the word reached him. His voice was barely audible. "They are done waiting." Eleanor's hands trembled. "We must tell Captain Hale." Edmund's jaw clenched. "And Rivenhall will hear." Eleanor swallowed. Then we must be careful. Edmund's eyes fixed on hers, bright and frightened. You will be blamed for this. Eleanor's voice steadied with effort. Then let them blame me. I will not sign their lie. Edmund stared at her, as if her refusal was both terrifying and wondrous. The next day, Rivenhall returned, not to the corridor this time, but to the servants' passage where Eleanor was carrying linens, as if he had chosen the most humiliating place to corner her. He did not look at the linens. He looked at her. "Miss Hart," he said pleasantly. Eleanor's stomach tightened. "My lord." Rivenhall's tone was almost warm. "I offered you assistance." Eleanor kept her gaze down. "Yes, my lord." "And you refused," he said. Eleanor swallowed. "I did." Rivenhall's smile lingered, thin. "You are loyal." Eleanor said nothing. Rivenhall leaned in slightly. "Loyalty is admirable when given to the right people." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the linen. "My lord, I must return to my duties." Rivenhall's voice softened. "Your duties will change one way or another. You may choose comfort or you may choose hardship." Eleanor swallowed. "I choose to do my work." Rivenhall's gaze sharpened. "Your work is to tell me what he says." Eleanor's heart pounded. She kept her voice calm. "He says very little, my lord." Rivenhall smiled. "Then you have nothing to fear by repeating it." Eleanor's mouth went dry. "My lord, I cannot." Rivenhall's smile vanished. "You can." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I will not." Rivenhall stared at her for a long moment. Then his tone returned to polite calm, colder now. "Very well. Then understand this. When the palace tidies itself, it will not pause to spare you." Eleanor forced herself to breathe. "Yes, my lord." Rivenhall stepped back. "Good girl." He walked away. Eleanor stood for a moment, linen trembling in her hands. When she returned to the wing, Edmund looked up at once. "He came," Edmund said. Eleanor swallowed. "Yes." Edmund's jaw clenched. "What did he want?" Eleanor's voice was low. "Your words." Edmund's eyes flashed. "And you gave him nothing." Eleanor shook her head. "Nothing." Edmund's shoulders loosened by a fraction, then tightened again. "Then he will move." Eleanor's throat tightened. "We must move too." That evening, Eleanor waited until the corridor quieted, then slipped to the door and tapped softly in the pattern Captain Hale had used. A pause. Then a knock returned. Careful. Eleanor opened the chain a crack. Captain Hale's face appeared, calm but alert. "Miss Hart," Eleanor whispered. "There is more." Captain Hale's gaze sharpened. "Tell me." Eleanor held her voice steady. In the ledger, there was a note in another hand. It said to ensure compliance, and if resistance continues, remove. Captain Hale's jaw tightened. "Remove." Eleanor nodded, throat tight. "And I believe the order does not come only from the physician." Captain Hale's eyes flicked to the corridor behind him, then back. "Do you have proof?" Eleanor's mouth went dry. "I saw it. I could not take it." Captain Hale's voice lowered. "Then we need something written, something we can present." Eleanor's hands trembled. "How can I get it?" Captain Hale hesitated. "When they are careless. When the cabinet is opened. When a tray is left unattended." Eleanor swallowed. "They are watching me." Captain Hale's gaze held hers. "Then do not be caught." Eleanor nodded. "Yes, sir." Captain Hale stepped back. "Be cautious, Miss Hart. The palace can forgive a mistake. It does not forgive disobedience." Eleanor whispered. "I have done both." Captain Hale's mouth tightened. "Then you must be twice as careful." He left. Eleanor closed the chain and turned. Edmund sat rigidly, eyes sharp. "You spoke to him again." Eleanor swallowed. "Yes." Edmund's jaw clenched. "You are building your own gallows." Eleanor's voice steadied. "Then let it be built from truth." Edmund stared at her as if he wanted to argue, but could not find the words. Hours passed. Mrs. Greaves came, then left. The physician came, then left. The palace's routine marched on as if it could smother any rebellion simply by continuing. But near midnight, Eleanor heard a soft sound from Edmund's inner room. A scrape, a breath, a restless shift. She stood from her chair. "Sir?" No answer. Eleanor moved toward the inner door, hesitating. She had been told not to enter unless necessary, but she had also been told to keep him quiet, and silence was never simple with Edmund. She knocked softly. "Sir, are you unwell?" A pause. Then Edmund's voice strained. "Do not leave me." Eleanor's chest tightened. She pushed the door open a fraction. Edmund sat on the edge of the bed, hands braced on the mattress, breathing hard, eyes bright with fear. Eleanor stepped in. "Careful." "Sir." Edmund's voice was low. "I dreamt the corridor again." Eleanor swallowed. "Do you want water?" Edmund shook his head once. "I want someone to be real." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I am here." Edmund's gaze fixed on her. "You should not be." Eleanor's hands trembled. "Then tell me to go." Edmund's jaw clenched. "Go," he said. But his eyes begged her to stay. Eleanor did not move. Edmund's breathing shook. "They will use this," Eleanor whispered. "Then we will not give them more than this. I will stand by the door. I will not come closer." She moved back a step, keeping herself near the threshold, visible, proper, restrained. Edmund watched her as if her restraint was the only safe thing left. Eleanor said softly, "Tell me what you remember." "Not everything, only one piece." Edmund's throat worked. "A ring," he whispered. "A seal ring pressed into wax." Eleanor's pulse spiked. "On a letter." Edmund nodded once. "Yes, they wanted my hand, my name, to make it lawful." Eleanor's chest tightened. "And you refused?" Edmund's voice roughened. "Yes." Eleanor swallowed. "That is proof." Edmund's eyes flicked to her. "No, it is memory." Eleanor's voice steadied. "Then we must find the letter." Edmund's breathing quickened. "Letters are kept where maids do not go." Eleanor's mouth tightened. "Then we must find a way." A soft click sounded from the outer door. Eleanor's blood ran cold. She turned her head toward the main room. Footsteps, measured, unhurried. A woman's voice, low and satisfied. "Mrs. Greaves." "And where is she?" Mrs. Greaves said. "If not where she ought to be." Eleanor stepped into the main room quickly, heart pounding. Lady Cromere stood just inside the door, gloved hands folded. Mrs. Greaves was beside her, eyes sharp. Lady Cromere's gaze swept the room, then landed on the open inner door behind Eleanor. "So," Lady Cromere said softly, "you have crossed into his private rooms." Eleanor's throat tightened. "My lady, he called for water. Lady Cromere's smile was thin. "You are alone with him after hours." Eleanor's cheeks burned. "I stood by the door." Lady Cromere's eyes flicked past her, toward Edmund, who had risen, and now stood in the inner doorway. Face pale, posture rigid. Edmund's voice cut in low. "She did nothing wrong." Lady Cromere's gaze did not soften. "Your Highness, you will return to bed." Edmund's jaw clenched. "Do not command me like—" Lady Cromere lifted a hand, and Edmund stopped, as if the gesture itself carried weight. Lady Cromere looked at Eleanor again. "This is precisely why you were chosen, because you were meant to be harmless." Eleanor swallowed. "I am harmless, my lady." Lady Cromere's voice stayed quiet. "No, you are inconvenient." Eleanor's chest tightened. "My lady, I have tried to follow the schedule." Lady Cromere's gaze sharpened. "You refused to sign. You spoke to the physician as if you were his equal. You have now been found in a position that invites interpretation." Eleanor's hands trembled. "I did not invite anything." Lady Cromere's smile returned, small and cruel in its calm. "That is the trouble with interpretation. It does not require your permission." Mrs. Greaves stepped closer, voice low. "I told her." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I only came because he was frightened." Lady Cromere's eyes narrowed. "Frightened." Edmund's voice came sharp. "Yes, frightened, like a man treated as a secret." Lady Cromere turned toward him, calm as ever. "Your Highness, you are agitated. This is why the schedule exists." Edmund's face went still. "Your schedule is not medicine. It is punishment." Lady Cromere's gaze flicked to Mrs. Greaves. "Send for Dr. Crichton." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "My lady, please." Lady Cromere looked at Eleanor, expression unreadable. "You will come with me." Eleanor's breath caught. "Now?" "Now," Lady Cromere said. "You will explain yourself properly." Eleanor's pulse hammered. "May I at least close the inner door?" Lady Cromere's eyes narrowed. You may do nothing without instruction. Edmund stepped forward, voice rough. Do not take her. Lady Cromer's gaze did not change. She is a servant. She goes where she is told. Eleanor's throat tightened. She looked at Edmund, wanting to promise something, anything. Edmund's eyes held hers, fierce and helpless at once. Leave, he whispered, and it sounded like a prayer he hated. Eleanor's chest ached. She could not obey him. She could not disobey Lady Cromer without bringing worse upon him. Lady Cromer turned slightly, voice low to Mrs. Greaves. It has gone far enough. Mrs. Greaves nodded once. Yes, my lady. Lady Cromer's eyes returned to Edmund, calm as winter. The court will not tolerate continued inconvenience. Eleanor's breath caught. Lady Cromer spoke the next word softly, as if stating a household adjustment, and they struck Eleanor like a blow. They will remove him permanently. Lady Cromer's words hung in the air as if the room itself had been ordered not to breathe. Eleanor felt her knees soften, but she stayed upright. She had learned that the palace respected posture more than truth. Edmund stood in the inner doorway, pale, rigid, his hands clenched, as if he could hold himself together by force alone. Permanently, Eleanor whispered, before she could stop herself. Lady Cromer's gaze returned to her. You will not repeat my words. You will simply obey them. Edmund took one step forward. You will not. Lady Cromer did not look startled. She looked satisfied, as if his resistance proved her point. Your Highness, she said, quiet and final. You are agitated. I'm awake, Edmund snapped. Mrs. Greaves shifted, uneasy. My lady! Lady Cromer lifted a hand without turning her head. Mrs. Greaves fell silent at once. Lady Cromer's eyes returned to Eleanor. Come with me. Eleanor's throat tightened. My lady, please, he only... Come, Lady Cromer repeated. Now. Eleanor's hands trembled. She glanced at Edmund, wanting to say something that would not betray them, but every word felt dangerous. Edmund's gaze held hers, fierce and helpless. Do not let them, his voice caught. He swallowed. Do not let them take me. Eleanor's chest ached. She made herself nod once, small, almost invisible. Lady Cromer moved toward the door, and Eleanor followed because refusal would only tighten the net around Edmund. In the corridor, Lady Cromer walked as if the palace belonged to her, not as if she served it. Mrs. Greaves trailed behind, eyes sharp with worry. Lady Cromer spoke without turning. You were selected because you would not be tempted to forget your place. Eleanor's voice came small. I have not forgotten it, my lady. Lady Cromer stopped so suddenly, Eleanor nearly collided with her. You entered his bedchamber, Lady Cromer said softly. He called for me, Eleanor said, steadying her voice. He was frightened. Lady Cromer's eyes narrowed. You say that as if fear is a reason. Eleanor swallowed. It is a reason to offer water, my lady. A maid does not enter a gentleman's room at midnight, Lady Cromer replied, still quiet. Not unless she wishes to be spoken of. Eleanor's cheeks burned. I did not wish. Lady Cromer's gaze cut her off. What you wish is irrelevant. What is useful is what matters. Eleanor's hands clenched. Useful for whom, my lady? Lady Cromer studied her for a long moment. Careful, Eleanor. The use of her name felt like a tightening string. Lady Cromer resumed walking. You have become noticeable. Eleanor kept her eyes down. I tried not to. Lady Cromer's voice stayed level. That is the tragedy. You tried, and yet here we are. They reached Lady Cromer's office. Inside, the room smelled of paper and polished wood, the clean scent of decisions made without compassion. Lady Cromer sat behind her desk and folded her hands. Mrs. Greaves stood by the door like a guard. Mr. Pearl appeared silently near the wall, as if summoned by the mere possibility of trouble. Lady Cromer gestured to the chair. Sit. Eleanor sat, spine straight, hands folded in her lap to hide their shaking. Lady Cromer opened a drawer and took out the statement again. She placed it on the desk along with a pen. This ends tonight, she said. Eleanor stared at the paper. My lady, if I sign that, you can blame me for anything. Lady Cromer's eyes did not flicker. Yes. Eleanor's breath caught. The bluntness was worse than any pretense. Lady Cromer leaned back slightly. I will be clear. The prince cannot remain a problem. The palace cannot keep rearranging itself around his moods. "He is not a mood," Eleanor said before she could stop herself. Mrs. Greaves made a quiet sound of alarm. Lady Cromer's gaze sharpened. "Do you wish to be dismissed immediately?" Eleanor forced her voice to soften. "No, my lady." "Then sign," Lady Cromer said, calm as winter. Eleanor's mind raced. If she signed, she would be bound to their lie. If she refused, Edmund would be removed and she would be discarded. Either way, they thought they had already won. So Eleanor did the only thing she could do in a palace. She became harmless again. She lowered her eyes. She let her shoulders droop a fraction, like a girl finally frightened into sense. "My lady," she whispered, "I do not want to be turned out." Lady Cromer's expression did not change, but Eleanor felt the attention shift. Interest, calculating. Eleanor continued, voice small. "I only wanted to keep him calm." Lady Cromer picked up the pen and held it out. "Then sign." Eleanor reached for it, then paused as if uncertain. Lady Cromer's eyes narrowed. "Do not test my patience." Eleanor swallowed and forced a timid nod. "May I ask one kindness, my lady?" "No," Lady Cromer said automatically, then paused. "What?" Eleanor kept her gaze lowered. "May I speak to Dr. Crichton, man, with you present?" Lady Cromer stared at her. "Why?" Eleanor chose her words with care. "Because I am afraid of making mistakes. He changes the schedule. He speaks quickly. If I misunderstand, I am blamed. If you hear him instruct me, there will be no misunderstanding." Mrs. Greaves blinked, thrown off balance. Lady Cromer studied Eleanor as if trying to find the trap. "You want me to listen to the physician's instructions?" "Yes, my lady," Eleanor whispered. "So I may obey them precisely." Lady Cromer's gaze lingered on her face. Then she nodded once. "Very well," Lady Cromer said. "Pell." Mr. Pell straightened. "My lady." "Fetch Dr. Crichton," Lady Cromer said. "Now." Eleanor's heart hammered. She kept her face timid, her hands still. Lady Cromer tapped the statement. "You will sign after." "Yes, my lady," Eleanor whispered. Mr. Pell left. Lady Cromer leaned forward slightly. "Do not imagine you have gained anything. You have delayed the inevitable by minutes." Eleanor lowered her gaze. "Yes, my lady." Minutes later, Dr. Crichton arrived, composed and faintly smiling, as if called for tea. "My lady," he said, bowing his head. "You wish to see me?" Lady Cromer gestured to the chair opposite Eleanor, but Dr. Crichton remained standing. Lady Cromer's voice stayed calm. "Your attendant seems confused by your schedule." "Doctor," Crichton glanced at Eleanor with polite amusement. "Do you?" Eleanor kept her eyes lowered. "Yes, sir. Sometimes the times change, and I fear I will do it wrongly." Dr. Crichton's smile thinned. "It changes as needed." Lady Cromer's eyes narrowed slightly. "As needed by whom?" Dr. Crichton's smile returned, smooth. "By His Highness's condition." Eleanor lifted her eyes just enough. "Then, sir, why does it increase when he is calmer?" A sharp silence fell. Dr. Crichton's gaze snapped to her. "Excuse me." Eleanor forced herself to look frightened, not defiant. "Forgive me, sir, I only wish to understand so I do not cause agitation." Lady Cromer's gaze tightened. "Answer the question, Doctor." Dr. Crichton's jaw worked once. He smiled again, but it was colder now. "When he is calmer, he is more responsive. That can be unhelpful." Lady Cromer's eyebrows lifted. "Unhelpful." Dr. Crichton's smile held. "The prince has a tendency to fixate, to speak of matters that ought not occupy him." Lady Cromer's eyes stayed on him. "Such as?" Dr. Crichton hesitated for half a breath too long. Eleanor's heart hammered. She forced her voice to remain small. "Sir, is it true you have written, 'Increased dosage, ensure silence'?" Mrs. Greaves inhaled sharply. Dr. Crichton's head turned slowly toward Eleanor. "Where did you hear that phrase?" Eleanor swallowed and looked at Lady Cromer as if asking permission. "My lady, I saw it." Lady Cromer's gaze sharpened, not at Eleanor but at Dr. Crichton. "Did you write it?" Dr. Crichton's mouth tightened. "My lady, this is a servant's confusion." "Did you write it?" Lady Cromer repeated, quiet and deadly. Dr. Crichton's smile returned, strained. "Those words may appear in notes." Lady Cromer leaned forward. "Why?" Dr. Crichton held her gaze. "Because the palace requires peace." Lady Cromer's voice stayed level. The palace requires peace, or certain men require convenience. Dr. Crichton's eyes flicked just once toward the door, toward the corridor, as if expecting someone. Eleanor saw it. She used it. "And who orders it, sir?" Eleanor asked softly. "When it increases." Dr. Crichton's gaze snapped back. "That is not your place." Lady Cromer's eyes narrowed. "Answer." Dr. Crichton's jaw clenched. "There are recommendations." Lady Cromer's voice hardened by a degree. "From whom?" "Doctor," Crichton swallowed. "From those responsible for the Crown's stability." Lady Cromer stared at him. "Names, Doctor." For a moment, Dr. Crichton looked as if he might refuse. Then he smiled, and it was the smile of a man who believed himself untouchable. "My lady," he said, "you know very well who takes interest in these matters." Eleanor's pulse spiked. It was not a name, but it was a crack. Lady Cromer's gaze held his. "You will show me your ledger." Dr. Crichton's smile faltered. "My lady, the ledger is a medical—" Lady Cromer cut him off. "You will show it to me now." Dr. Crichton's eyes flashed with irritation. He quickly smoothed away. "As you wish." He took a key from his pocket, as Eleanor had seen before, and opened the cabinet Lady Cromer had never touched in front of a servant. He withdrew the ledger. Eleanor's heart pounded so hard she felt dizzy. Dr. Crichton set the ledger on Lady Cromer's desk and flipped it open. He turned pages quickly, too quickly. Lady Cromer's voice was cold. "Slower." Dr. Crichton slowed, then stopped on a page and held it flat. Lady Cromer leaned in and examined it. Her eyes moved down the lines. Then they paused at the torn edge where a page should have been. Lady Cromer's voice became very quiet. "Why is a page missing?" Dr. Crichton's smile returned, brittle. "Paper tears, my lady." Lady Cromer lifted her gaze. "Paper tears in the direction of truth, does it?" Mrs. Greaves shifted, sweating. Eleanor's hands tightened in her lap. She forced herself not to look triumphant. There was no triumph here, only a chance. Lady Cromer turned a page. Her eyes narrowed at a darker line of ink. "This is not the same hand," Lady Cromer said. Dr. Crichton's jaw tightened. "Assistants make notes." Lady Cromer's gaze sharpened. "Instructing removal." Dr. Crichton went still. Eleanor's breath caught. Lady Cromer had found the note Eleanor had glimpsed. Lady Cromer looked up, her calm now edged with contempt. "You have been taking orders." Dr. Crichton's voice stayed polite, but his eyes hardened. "My lady, it is not as simple as—" Lady Cromer snapped the ledger shut. The sound was small, but it landed like a gavel. "It is as simple as this," Lady Cromer said. "You have exceeded your authority." Dr. Crichton's face tightened. "My lady, if you embarrass the wrong person—" Lady Cromer's gaze turned glacial. "Do not threaten me in my own office." Dr. Crichton's mouth opened, then closed. Lady Cromer stood. "Pell, summon Captain Hale." Mr. Pell blinked, startled. "My lady?" "Summon him," Lady Cromer repeated. "Now." Mr. Pell hurried out. Eleanor's heart pounded. Captain Hale, a witness with a uniform. A man the palace could not dismiss as a foolish girl. Dr. Crichton's gaze slid to Eleanor, sharp and assessing. "This was you." Eleanor lowered her eyes. "I only wanted to obey, sir." His smile was thin. "You wanted to obey so loudly that others heard." Lady Cromer's voice cut in. "Speak only when spoken to, Doctor." Dr. Crichton went rigid. When Captain Hale arrived, his boots quiet on the carpet, the air changed. Authority entered. Not the soft authority of etiquette, but the hard authority of procedure. Captain Hale bowed. "My lady," Lady Cromer gestured to the ledger. "Captain, you will witness this." Captain Hale's gaze sharpened. He stepped closer and looked at the ledger, as Lady Cromer reopened it to the torn page and the darker note. His jaw tightened, but he kept his face controlled. "Yes, my lady." Lady Cromer turned to Dr. Crichton. "You will explain in Captain Hale's hearing why you are instructed to ensure compliance and remove if resistance continues." Dr. Crichton's smile returned, brittle. "My lady, this is a misunderstanding." Captain Hale's voice was calm. "Then it will be easily corrected." Dr. Crichton looked between them, calculating. His gaze flicked to the door again, as if expecting rescue. It did not come. He exhaled sharply. "The prince is a sensitive matter." Lady Cromer's voice was quiet. "Name the man who instructed you." Dr. Crichton's eyes hardened. "I do not take orders from servants." Lady Cromer's gaze narrowed. "Name him." Dr. Crichton's mouth tightened. "Lord Rivenhall communicates concerns." Eleanor's breath caught. Captain Hale's eyes sharpened. He did not speak, but the name landed heavy and undeniable. Lady Cromer stared at Dr. Crichton. "And you call those concerns medical necessity?" Dr. Crichton's voice sharpened despite himself. "My lady, do you want the prince loose in the palace? Do you want whispers in the newspapers? Do you want the court embarrassed?" Lady Cromer's eyes went cold. "I want you removed from your post." Dr. Crichton's face went white. "My lady—" Lady Cromer lifted her hand. "Captain Hale, you will escort Dr. Crichton to his quarters. He will pack. He will leave the palace grounds by sunset. He will not speak to anyone on his way out." Captain Hale nodded once. "Yes, my lady." Dr. Crichton's jaw clenched. "You are making a mistake." Lady Cromer's voice was quiet. "No, you did." Captain Hale stepped forward. Dr. Crichton hesitated, then bowed stiffly, his smile gone. "As you wish, my lady." He left with Captain Hale. The room exhaled, but Eleanor did not. Her lungs still felt too tight. Lady Cromer remained standing, staring at the ledger. Mrs. Greaves whispered, "My lady, Lord Rivenhall will not like—" Lady Cromer's gaze snapped to Mrs. Greaves. "Mrs. Greaves, if you have been complicit, you will pray I decide you were merely obedient." Mrs. Greaves turned pale. "My lady, I only followed—" "Enough," Lady Cromer said. "Go." Mrs. Greaves fled. Mr. Pell lingered by the wall, eyes wide. Lady Cromer looked at him. "Pell, no word of this leaves this room." Mr. Pell bowed quickly. "No, my lady." He left. Now only Eleanor and Lady Cromer remained. Lady Cromer sat again and regarded Eleanor with a long, unreadable look. "You are either dangerously foolish," Lady Cromer said, "or unexpectedly useful." Eleanor's throat tightened. "My lady, I did not mean to—" Lady Cromer held up a hand. "Do not pretend innocence. You are not innocent. You are simply clean in your motives." Eleanor blinked, startled. Lady Cromer continued, voice calm. "I will not pretend compassion, Eleanor. The palace does not run on compassion. It runs on containment." Eleanor's hands clenched in her lap. "Then why dismiss him?" Lady Cromer's gaze sharpened. "Because I will not be made a fool by a man like Rivenhall." Eleanor swallowed. "And the prince." Lady Cromer paused. "And the prince," she said, as if allowing the truth in reluctantly. "He will receive a new physician, one who answers to me." Eleanor's chest loosened by a thread. "Then you will not remove him." Lady Cromer's eyes narrowed. "Do not assume you have saved him. You have only changed the terms of his captivity." Eleanor's voice shook. "He should not be captive." Lady Cromer's gaze held hers. "Perhaps. But you are a maid, Eleanor. You will not rewrite the monarchy with bread and tea." Eleanor swallowed hard. "What will happen to me?" Lady Cromer picked up the statement and tore it in half with one clean motion. Then in half again. Eleanor stared. Lady Cromer let the pieces fall into the wastebasket. "You will remain for now." Eleanor's breath caught. "My lady—" "Do not thank me," Lady Cromer said. "I am not rewarding you. I am using you." Eleanor lowered her eyes. "Yes, my lady." Lady Cromer's tone cooled. "You will not wander. You will not be alone with him after hours. You will not speak to Captain Hale unless spoken to." Eleanor's stomach tightened. "Yes, my lady." Lady Cromer leaned forward slightly. "And if Lord Rivenhall approaches you again, you will tell me." Eleanor hesitated. Then she whispered, "Yes, my lady." Lady Cromer's gaze lingered. "Go back to the wing." Eleanor stood, curtsied, and left with her heart pounding. When she reached the heavy door, Mrs. Greaves was not there. Captain Hale stood in the corridor instead, face composed. He did not speak at first. He simply unlocked the door and opened it, then stepped back as if giving Eleanor permission to enter without being seen talking too long. Eleanor whispered, "Captain." Captain Hale's voice was low. "He is safe for today." Eleanor's throat tightened. "And the doctor. Gone by sunset," Captain Hale replied. "You did well." Eleanor shook her head. "I only asked questions." Captain Hale's gaze held hers. "Sometimes that is enough." Eleanor swallowed. "My lady dismissed him." Captain Hale nodded. "For now the palace has chosen order over convenience." Eleanor's mouth tightened. "And Lord Rivenhall." Captain Hale's jaw clenched slightly. "He will not enjoy this." Eleanor's heart pounded. "Will he punish the prince?" Captain Hale's voice stayed calm. "He will try." Eleanor whispered. "And me." Captain Hale met her eyes. "Be cautious, but do not be silent." Eleanor nodded, then slipped inside. Edmund was standing, as if he had refused to sit until he knew whether Eleanor would return. His eyes met hers at once. "You came back," he said, voice rough. Eleanor's throat tightened. "Yes, sir." Edmund's jaw clenched. "And you are not in chains." Eleanor gave a small, breathless sound that might have been laughter if her chest had not felt so tight. "No chains, sir." Edmund stared at her as if trying to understand the impossible. Eleanor moved closer, stopping at a proper distance, hands clasped. "Dr. Crichton is dismissed." Edmund went very still. "Dismissed?" Eleanor nodded. "By Lady Cromere." Edmund's mouth parted slightly, then closed. His eyes flicked to the cabinet as if expecting it to open and prove her wrong. "And Rivenhall," Edmund whispered. Eleanor swallowed. His name was said aloud. In Captain Hale's hearing, Edmund exhaled a shaky breath. The sound held years of being unheard. Eleanor's voice softened. "You are not a rumour today." Edmund's gaze snapped to her, bright and unguarded. "What did you do?" Eleanor's hands trembled. "I made myself small. Then I asked the right question." Edmund's jaw clenched. "You should not have had to." Eleanor's eyes stung. "No." Edmund stared at her for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower. "Why did you do it?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "Because you asked me not to let them take you." Edmund's gaze held hers. "That is not enough." Eleanor swallowed. The truth rose in her chest, frightening in its simplicity. "It is enough," she whispered. "And it is more. I cannot watch you be swallowed by silence." Edmund's fingers curled at his sides. "Eleanor." She held his gaze steady. "I do not know what tomorrow brings. I only know I could not leave you to that cupboard and that schedule and those smiles." Edmund's voice roughened. "You should be angry with me." Eleanor's brow furrowed. "Why?" "Because you have risked everything for a man who has nothing to offer you," Edmund said, and the words sounded like they hurt him to speak. "I cannot give you safety. I cannot give you a name that does not invite mockery. I cannot even promise I will be steady." Eleanor's chest ached. "I did not ask you for promises." Edmund's gaze sharpened. "Then what do you want?" Eleanor's voice was quiet. "I want you to be treated like a human being." Edmund's throat worked. He looked away, jaw tight, as if emotion were something he had been trained to punish in himself. When he looked back, his eyes were wet but controlled. "You see me," he said quietly. Eleanor nodded once. "Yes." Edmund took a careful breath. "No one has said yes to that in years." Eleanor's lips trembled. "Then let me say it again." Edmund's mouth tightened, and when he spoke, his voice was a restrained confession. "When you enter the room, I remember I am not merely a problem." Eleanor's eyes stung. She kept her voice steady. "Then remember it now." A knock came at the door. Eleanor stiffened. Captain Hale's voice, low. "Miss Hart, my lady's instruction." Eleanor went to the door and opened it enough to receive a folded note. She returned and read it quickly, then looked up at Edmund. "What?" Edmund asked, tense. Eleanor's breath caught, then eased. "You are permitted to walk in the enclosed garden, with supervision, for a short time." Edmund stared at her as if she had said the sea had moved to the palace steps. "The garden," he repeated. Eleanor nodded. "Yes." Edmund's hands trembled slightly. "Why?" Eleanor swallowed. "Because Lady Cromere wants order, and because a prince seen walking calmly is harder to call a monster." Edmund's jaw clenched. "They will watch." Eleanor nodded. "Yes." Edmund's gaze met hers. "Will you be there?" Eleanor's throat tightened. "I will be behind you as a servant must, but I will be there." Edmund exhaled, slow and unsteady, as if he were learning how to breathe in a different life. Later, when Captain Hale escorted them through a quiet corridor, Edmund walked with careful steps, like a man uncertain the floor would keep its promise. In the small enclosed garden, Edmund stopped at the gate and stared through the bars at the winter bare branches beyond, as if the world had become both familiar and strange. Captain Hale kept a respectful distance. Eleanor stood behind Edmund, hands clasped, heart pounding. Edmund turned his head slightly, just enough that only she would hear. "You should have left," he murmured. Eleanor whispered, "And you should have been loved properly, long ago." Edmund's breath caught. He did not touch her. He did not break the rules that could destroy her. He only leaned a fraction closer, as if her steadiness were warmth. And in that quiet, with the gate between him and the wider world, Edmund said softly, "Then do not leave me now." The garden walks became the palace's newest rumour, not because Edmund raised his voice, not because he behaved wildly, but because he did not. He walked slowly under Captain Hale's watch. Eleanor followed a proper distance behind, hands clasped, eyes lowered when anyone passed. And yet the very sight of a prince breathing fresh air unsettled the household that had grown comfortable with his absence. On the third morning, Mrs. Greaves met Eleanor at the wing door, with her lips pressed thin. "You will not linger in the corridor," Mrs. Greaves said. "You will not speak to guards. You will do your work and vanish." Eleanor curtsied. "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves's eyes narrowed. "And you will stop being seen." Eleanor kept her voice mild. "I will try, ma'am." Mrs. Greaves made a sound of irritation and left. Inside, Edmund waited by the table. He stood when Eleanor entered, as if standing itself was an act of defiance. "You are pale," he said. Eleanor forced a small breath. "It is only the air in these passages, sir." Edmund's gaze sharpened. "Do not lie." Eleanor lowered her eyes. "They are angry." Edmund's jaw clenched. "Rivenhall." Eleanor nodded slightly. "His name is being said more carefully now. That means he is listening harder." Edmund exhaled through his nose, a controlled sound. "He will not allow a maid to become the hinge of a door." Eleanor's hands tightened. "Then I will be a lock." Edmund stared at her. "You speak like a soldier." Eleanor shook her head quickly. "No, sir." Like a woman tired of being pushed. Edmund's mouth tightened, then softened at the edges. "You are not meant to be here." Eleanor lifted her eyes. "And yet I am." A knock sounded. Captain Hale's voice came low through the door. "Your Highness, Miss Hart, Lady Cromere requests you both." Edmund went still. "Both." Eleanor's stomach dropped. "To her office." Captain Hale paused. "To the blue parlour." Edmund's eyes narrowed. "A room meant to impress." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Or to judge." They went together, not side by side, not as equals, not in any way the palace would call improper. Edmund walked ahead with Captain Hale. Eleanor followed behind, steadying her breath with each step. In the blue parlour, Lady Cromere waited with two men Eleanor had never seen so close. One wore the quiet authority of someone who carried messages that did not invite refusal. The other held a leather folio and a sealed envelope. Lady Cromere did not ask them to sit. "Your Highness," she said to Edmund, "this is Sir Alton Finch, of the Lord Chamberlain's office." Sir Alton bowed. "Your Highness." Edmund returned the bow with careful dignity. "Sir," Lady Cromere turned her gaze to Eleanor, "and this is Mr. Wythe, clerk to Sir Alton." Mr. Wythe nodded at Eleanor as if she were part of the furniture. "Miss Hart," Eleanor curtsied. "Sir." Sir Alton opened the folio. "We are here because a concern has been raised regarding your treatment, Your Highness." Edmund's jaw tightened. "A concern." Sir Alton's eyes moved briefly to Eleanor, then back to Edmund. "And because certain documents suggest improper influence." Lady Cromere spoke calmly. "Captain Hale has delivered the ledger pages to Sir Alton." Captain Hale stood near the door, face composed. "Yes, my lady." Edmund looked at Eleanor, then back to Sir Alton. "And what does the Crown intend?" Sir Alton's voice remained neutral. "The Crown intends to learn the truth without spectacle." Edmund's mouth twisted. "Spectacle is what they made of me." Lady Cromer's gaze sharpened. Not today. Sir Alton cleared his throat. Your Highness, I must ask you plainly. Were you pressured to sign any document in recent years? Edmund's fingers curled at his sides. Eleanor saw the effort it took him to keep his breathing steady. Yes, Edmund said, repeatedly. Sir Alton's eyes narrowed. By whom? Edmund's jaw clenched. Lord Rivenhall. Mr. Wyth's pen paused. Sir Alton did not show surprise. He only nodded once. And did the pressure coincide with increased medication and isolation? Edmund's gaze fixed on the carpet for a moment. Yes. Sir Alton turned a page. Did you refuse to sign because you believed the document false or harmful? Edmund's voice was low. Because I would not be used. A short silence fell. Then Sir Alton looked at Eleanor. Miss Hart, he said, you are not obliged to speak, but you have been named in reports regarding irregularities in schedule and dosage. Your statement may be considered. Eleanor's throat tightened. She glanced at Lady Cromer, then at Captain Hale. No one nodded. No one rescued her from the decision. The palace rarely did. Eleanor kept her hands folded. Sir, I am only a maid. Sir Alton's tone remained steady. And yet you observed. Eleanor swallowed. Yes, sir. Edmund's eyes flicked to her, warning and pleading at once. Eleanor spoke carefully. When the physician reduced the tonics, His Highness was calmer. He spoke more clearly. When the tonics increased, he became dulled. Not soothed, dulled. Sir Alton watched her. You are certain? Eleanor nodded. Yes, sir. Mr. Wythe wrote quickly. Sir Alton lifted the sealed envelope. This is a notice of immediate review signed by the Lord Chamberlain's authority. It instructs that no further changes are to be made to His Highness's care without oversight. Edmund's breath caught, then steadied. Oversight. Lady Cromer's voice was calm. It means the schedule is no longer a private weapon. Edmund's gaze sharpened. And Rivenhall. Sir Alton set the envelope down. Lord Rivenhall has been asked to account for his involvement. Eleanor's stomach tightened. Asked. Sir Alton's eyes held hers for a brief moment. The Crown prefers a dignified exit over a public trial, but it will not ignore falsified medical records. Captain Hale's jaw tightened slightly. Edmund's voice came low. He will try to drag her down with him. Lady Cromer's gaze moved to Edmund. He may try. Eleanor's throat tightened. My lady. Lady Cromer's expression remained unreadable. You will remain under my protection while this inquiry proceeds. Eleanor's breath caught. Thank you, my lady. Lady Cromer's eyes cooled. Do not thank me, be useful. Sir Alton closed the folio. There is another matter. Edmund's posture stiffened. What? Sir Alton spoke evenly. The palace intends to reintroduce you to limited society, Your Highness, quietly, under controlled conditions. Edmund's mouth twisted. Displayed again. Lady Cromer cut in. Presented, not displayed. You will not be placed near a window like a curiosity. You will be present in a drawing room like a man. Edmund's gaze flicked to Eleanor, then away. They will stare. Sir Alton nodded. They will. And then they will grow bored. Which is the goal. Edmund's jaw clenched. And if I refuse? Sir Alton's tone did not change. Then rumours will remain the only story. Silence held. Then Edmund said, I will attend. Eleanor's heart lurched. Lady Cromer's eyes narrowed slightly, as if surprised he had chosen so quickly. Edmund added, voice low but steady, on my terms. Sir Alton inclined his head. You may state them. Edmund looked directly at Lady Cromer. No tonics before the gathering. Lady Cromer held his gaze. Agreed, under supervision of the new physician. Edmund's voice tightened. And Miss Hart will not be dismissed. Eleanor's breath caught. Lady Cromer's gaze snapped to Eleanor, then back to Edmund. That is not your decision. Edmund's jaw clenched. It is my condition. Sir Alton's eyes sharpened, interested now. Your Highness. Edmund's voice stayed controlled. She has been threatened. She has been made a target. If she is cast out now, she will be punished for speaking the truth. Lady Cromer's mouth tightened. You are not married to her. The words struck the air like a slap meant for Eleanor to feel. Eleanor's cheeks burned. She lowered her eyes, forcing herself not to flinch. Edmund went very still. "No," he said quietly. "I am not." Lady Cromere leaned back slightly. "Then do not speak like a man who intends to be." Edmund's gaze held hers. "Perhaps I do." The room seemed to stop. Mr. With's pen hovered, then resumed as if he had been trained never to react. Sir Alton cleared his throat gently. "Your Highness, that is a significant statement." Edmund did not look away. "It is the first honest one I have been allowed." Eleanor's throat tightened until it hurt. Lady Cromere's eyes narrowed, but her voice stayed calm. "We are not discussing marriage in front of clerks." Edmund turned his head slightly, just enough to look at Eleanor. His eyes were bright, not wild, determined. "Then we will discuss it later," he said. Sir Alton closed the folio with finality. "The gathering will be held in 4 days. Attendance will be limited. The goal is calm, not romance, not scandal." Edmund's gaze did not leave Eleanor. "Calm," he repeated, as if promising it to her rather than to them. When they were dismissed and returned to the wing, Eleanor tried to keep her steps steady. Her heart was not steady at all. Inside, she shut the door and leaned her back against it for a moment before she could stop herself. Then she straightened at once, as if she had been caught. Edmund watched her. "You heard it," he said. Eleanor swallowed. "I heard you speak without asking permission." Edmund's mouth tightened. "I am tired of asking." Eleanor's hands trembled. "You spoke of marriage." Edmund's eyes held hers. "Yes." Eleanor's voice came out small. "You cannot." Edmund took a slow breath. "Tell me why." "Because I am a maid," Eleanor whispered. "Because the palace will tear me apart and call it propriety." Edmund's jaw clenched. "Let it." Eleanor shook her head quickly. "You do not understand what they do to women who are convenient to blame." Edmund's gaze softened, and that softness felt dangerous. "I understand blame." Eleanor's eyes stung. "Not like this." Edmund stepped closer, then stopped himself at a proper distance, as if restraining his whole body was an act of devotion. "Eleanor," he said, voice low, "when you refused to sign that paper, you stood where no one stands. Not for me, for truth. And I cannot unsee that." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Truth does not give me a place at your table." Edmund's mouth twisted. "Then I will move the table." Eleanor let out a shaky breath. "You cannot move a palace." Edmund's gaze sharpened. "Then I will move myself." Eleanor stared at him. "What do you mean?" Edmund's voice was steady. "If the price of being treated as a man is pretending I do not love the only person who looked at me without disgust, then the price is too high." Eleanor's hands rose to her chest as if to steady her heart. "Do not say love." Edmund's eyes did not waver. "Why? Does it frighten you?" Eleanor's voice broke. "It frightens me because I believe you." Edmund's jaw clenched, then eased. "Good." Eleanor swallowed hard. "And it frightens me because they will punish you for it." Edmund's gaze softened again. "They already punished me for breathing." Eleanor looked away, blinking quickly. Edmund said quietly, "Look at me." Eleanor forced herself to meet his eyes. He spoke slowly, as if placing each word carefully where it could not be twisted. "I will not touch you improperly. I will not ruin you in secret. I will not ask you to be my shameful comfort." Eleanor's breath caught. Edmund continued, voice low. "If I claim you, I will claim you in daylight." Eleanor's lips trembled. "They will call it madness." Edmund's mouth tightened. "Let them. I know what madness is. It is silence forced on a man until he doubts his own mind." Eleanor whispered, "And what is this?" Edmund's eyes held hers. "This is choice." The 4 days passed like a tight thread stretched between 2 hands. A new physician arrived, quieter than Dr. Crichton, careful in his speech. He asked Edmund questions and listened to answers. Real listening. That alone made Edmund's shoulders loosen, as if his body had been braced for years against being ignored. Lord Rivenhall was not seen in the corridors, but his shadow was. Servants whispered about him in careful tones. Someone said he had gone to consult. Someone else said Lady Cromere had forbidden him the north wing entirely. On the morning of the gathering, Lady Cromere entered the wing herself, accompanied by 2 footmen carrying a tailored coat. Edmund stood when she entered. His jaw was tight, but his gaze was clear. Lady Cromere spoke briskly. You will wear this. Edmund looked at the coat without moving. To be displayed. To be presentable, Lady Cromere corrected. If you wish society to stop imagining monsters, you must give it something boring to look at. Edmund gave a short breath. Very well. Lady Cromere's gaze flicked to Eleanor. You will attend as maid behind him. You will not speak unless required. Eleanor curtsied. Yes, my lady. Lady Cromere's eyes narrowed. And you will keep your distance. Eleanor's cheeks warmed. Yes, my lady. Edmund's voice cut in, controlled. Do not punish her with rules you do not impose on others. Lady Cromere's gaze snapped to him. Do not test me. Edmund held her gaze. I am not testing. I am stating. Lady Cromere's mouth tightened. We will speak of this after the gathering. Edmund's voice was quiet. We will speak of it in front of witnesses, if needed. Lady Cromere stared at him for a long moment, then turned away. Dress. The guests arrive at 5. When she left, Eleanor helped Edmund with the coat, hands careful, never lingering. She kept her eyes down, but she could feel his attention like warmth. When she finished, Edmund spoke softly. Thank you. Eleanor's throat tightened. You are welcome, sir. He paused. If this goes badly, Eleanor lifted her eyes. It will not. Edmund's mouth twisted. You do not know that. Eleanor's voice steadied. Then I will learn it, and I will stand anyway. At 5, the drawing room filled with the quiet hum of restrained curiosity. Eleanor stayed near the wall behind Edmund, exactly as commanded. She could see faces turn toward him and then away again, as if looking too long might be indecent. Whispers moved like small birds. He is calmer than I expected. He looks, well, perhaps it was exaggerated. Eleanor heard a woman murmur, Poor thing, and then correct herself quickly. Poor prince, as if pity needed a title to be allowed. Edmund stood near the mantel, hands clasped behind his back. Captain Hale stood discreetly at the edge of the room. Lady Cromere hovered near a group of older ladies, her expression composed. Then the doors opened again. Lord Rivenhall entered. Eleanor's stomach dropped. He smiled as if he had never been denied anything in his life. He crossed the room with measured ease and stopped a respectful distance from Edmund. Your Highness, he said, voice smooth. How gratifying to see you among us. Edmund's face went still. Rivenhall. Rivenhall's smile did not waver. I have missed our conversations. Edmund's voice was quiet. You miss my silence. Rivenhall chuckled softly, as if indulging a joke. Let us not revisit painful matters on such a pleasant evening. Edmund held his gaze. Pleasant for you. Rivenhall's eyes flicked briefly toward Eleanor. Eleanor kept her gaze lowered, but she felt the look like a hand on her throat. Rivenhall spoke smoothly to Edmund. I confess, I have heard a curious rumor. Edmund did not respond. Rivenhall continued, louder now, making sure the nearest group could hear, that your attendant has taken liberties, that she lingers in private rooms, that she has inserted herself into your affairs. Eleanor's cheeks burned, her hands clenched behind her skirts. Lady Cromere's posture stiffened. Edmund's voice came low and steady. That rumor is yours. Rivenhall's smile widened. Is it? Edmund turned slightly, his gaze sweeping the room. The hum quieted as people sensed a shift. Not a scene, but a decision. He spoke clearly. Miss Hart has done her duty. Rivenhall's eyes narrowed. Your Highness, I only wish to protect you from misunderstandings. Edmund's mouth tightened. So you wish to protect yourself? Rivenhall chuckled softly. From what? A maid's devotion. Edmund's gaze sharpened. From the truth. Lady Cromere stepped forward. My lord, this is neither the time nor... Edmund lifted a hand, not toward Lady Cromere, but in the simple gesture of a man claiming the right to speak. The room fell silent. He looked at Sir Alton Finch, who stood near the doorway with the calm expression of a man who had attended many unpleasant conversations on behalf of the Crown. Sir Alton, Edmund said, is it proper that Lord Rivenhall has been named in an inquiry regarding falsified medical schedules and pressure for signatures? A hush fell so deep, Eleanor could hear her own breathing. Sir Alton's voice was even. Your Highness, it is proper that the Crown addresses such matters without public disorder. Edmund nodded once. Then let us avoid disorder by using simple words. He turned his gaze back to Rivenhall. You demanded my signature. You used medicine and isolation to punish refusal. You attempted to buy Miss Hart's loyalty. When she refused, you attempted to soil her name. Rivenhall's smile froze. This is... Edmund cut him off, still controlled. A clerk's copy exists. Captain Hale witnessed the ledger, and if you continue, the Crown may decide dignity is no longer your privilege. Rivenhall's eyes flicked toward Sir Alton. For the first time his composure cracked. Lady Cromer's voice came quiet. My lord, you should leave. Rivenhall's mouth tightened. I will not be dismissed by a housekeeper. Sir Alton spoke gently. You will be dismissed by the door, my lord, if you do not choose it yourself. Rivenhall's gaze snapped to Eleanor again, sharp with resentment. Eleanor kept her head bowed, but her voice rose steady and clear because she could not let silence be the weapon again. My lord, she said, I did not linger for scandal. I lingered because he asked for water. A ripple moved through the room. Not laughter, something closer to shame. Rivenhall's face hardened. You speak out of turn. Eleanor lifted her chin. I speak the truth. Edmund turned toward her, and the look he gave her was not ownership. It was recognition. Then he looked back to the room, and his voice softened without losing strength. I will not allow her to be punished for decency, he said, because decency is what restored me. Lady Cromer's eyes narrowed, but she did not interrupt. Edmund continued clearly, I have been called unstable, dangerous, unfit. The most dangerous thing I have done is refuse to be erased. Silence held. Then Edmund did the one thing Eleanor had feared and dreamed of in the same breath. He crossed the small space toward her. He stopped at a proper distance, as if holding himself to the strictest rule so no one could claim impropriety. He spoke so the room could hear. Eleanor Hart, he said, you were sent to me because you were considered harmless. You were meant to be forgotten. I will not forget you. Eleanor's breath caught. Her eyes stung. Edmund's voice tightened, controlled emotion trembling beneath it. Will you be my wife? A gasp went through the room, quick and involuntary. Eleanor stood very still. She felt every gaze. She felt the old weight of her station pressing down. She felt the fear of being turned into a rumor. And then she felt Edmund's eyes, steady on hers, not asking her to be brave alone. Her voice shook at first. Your Highness. Edmund's mouth tightened. Do not hide behind my title. Speak to me as a man. Eleanor swallowed hard. Edmund, if I say yes, they will despise me. Edmund's voice was quiet. Let them, I will not. Eleanor's chest tightened until it hurt. If I say yes, they will call it madness. Edmund's gaze held hers. Then let them learn what sanity looks like. Eleanor's breath trembled out of her. She lifted her chin. Yes, she said, clear enough to be heard. I will. The room held still for a heartbeat. Then Sir Alton cleared his throat, as if pulling the moment back into the world of law. Your Highness, he said gently, royal consent is required. Edmund turned his head slightly. Then I will request it in the proper manner. Lady Cromer stepped forward, her face unreadable. And you will do it quickly, before gossip does what gossip does. Edmund looked at her. Will you oppose it? Lady Cromer's eyes narrowed. I oppose chaos. Edmund's voice was steady. Then help me prevent it. Lady Cromer held his gaze for a long moment. Then she spoke, clipped and practical. Sir Alton, you will convey the request tonight. Captain Hale will deliver the supporting documents. Mr. Wythe will prepare the necessary record. And someone, she added, eyes flicking to Eleanor, will ensure Miss Hart is not devoured by this room before supper is cleared. Captain Hale stepped forward calm. Yes, my lady. Rivenhall's face had gone tight and pale. He looked as if he wanted to speak, but knew any sound would be used against him. He turned sharply and walked out. The room exhaled. Some faces showed disapproval, some showed relief. A few showed something like admiration they did not want to confess. Eleanor's hands trembled. Edmund did not reach for her. He did not touch her. He only leaned slightly closer, voice low. I will not leave you to them, he murmured. Eleanor's throat tightened. And I will not leave you to silence. 2 days later, Sir Alton returned to the blue parlour with a sealed letter. Eleanor stood near the doorway, hands clasped, heart pounding so hard she felt it in her wrists. Edmund stood tall, shoulders squared as if he had decided never to shrink again. Sir Alton bowed and held out the letter. Her Majesty grants consent. Eleanor's breath caught. She pressed a hand to her chest before she could stop herself. Edmund did not open the letter immediately. He looked at Eleanor first. "Do you still mean yes?" he asked quietly, as if giving her one last door to walk through without shame. Eleanor's eyes stung. "I mean yes." Edmund exhaled, a slow, unsteady breath that sounded like relief after years of holding it. Lady Cromere, standing nearby, said briskly, "Then the ceremony will be private, respectable, and swift. No lingering." Eleanor managed a shaky sound. "Yes, my lady." Lady Cromere's gaze flicked to her. "Do not look so frightened. You have already faced worse than a chapel." Eleanor swallowed. "Yes, my lady." Edmund's mouth tightened with something like gratitude. "Thank you." Lady Cromere's eyes narrowed. "Do not make a habit of it." The wedding was held in the palace chapel with only a handful of witnesses. Sir Alton, Captain Hale, Lady Cromere, and one elderly chaplain whose hands shook slightly as if he understood the weight of what he was blessing. Eleanor wore a simple dress, clean and modest, because grandeur was not her language. Her hands trembled when the chaplain asked the vows, but her voice did not fail. Edmund spoke his vows slowly, as if each word was a key turning in a lock that had held too long. When the chaplain declared them husband and wife, Edmund did not kiss her. He did not break the rules of their world in front of those who could twist it. He only took her hand in his, carefully, reverently, as if her fingers were something precious he had been permitted to hold at last. Later, in the corridor outside the chapel, Eleanor stopped, overwhelmed in a way she could not hide. Edmund turned toward her. "What is it?" Eleanor's voice shook. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me this is not allowed." Edmund's eyes softened. "They did tell us." Eleanor swallowed. And yet we are here," Edmund said quietly. Captain Hale stood a discreet distance away, pretending not to hear. Lady Cromere approached, holding a folded document. She offered it to Edmund, not unkindly, not warmly either. "Simply as a fact. Your new household arrangements," she said. "Separate wing, proper staff, a physician selected by the Lord Chamberlain's office, no private tonics, no hidden schedules." Edmund took the paper and glanced at it. "And Rivenhall." Lady Cromere's mouth tightened. "He has resigned his court appointment. He will not be near you." Eleanor's breath caught. Lady Cromere's gaze flicked to Eleanor. "Miss Hart," she said, then corrected herself with visible annoyance at having to be correct. "Princess Edmund." Eleanor's cheeks went hot. "My lady." Lady Cromere's eyes narrowed. "Do not be foolish with your new title. It does not protect you from stupidity." Eleanor managed a small, trembling smile. "Yes, my lady." Lady Cromere hesitated, then added quieter, "You did what many people with more education and more authority did not do. You looked at a locked door and decided it should open." Eleanor's throat tightened. "It should have opened long ago." Lady Cromere's expression was unreadable, but her voice softened by a fraction. "Yes, it should have." She turned and walked away, as if leaving tenderness behind was the only way she knew to survive. When the corridor emptied, Edmund faced Eleanor fully. Now, without the room of strangers, without the weight of witnesses pressing in, his restraint remained, but his eyes were unguarded. "You are trembling," he said. Eleanor let out a shaky breath. "I am trying to learn how to be happy without fearing punishment for it." Edmund's jaw tightened with emotion. "I do not know how either." Eleanor's eyes stung. "Then we will learn together." Edmund lifted her hand and brought it to his lips. A simple, proper gesture that somehow felt more intimate than anything improper could have been. "I spent years believing I was made only to be contained," he said quietly. "And then you walked into my room with bread and a steady voice." Eleanor swallowed. "I was terrified." Edmund's mouth softened. "Yes, and you stayed anyway." Eleanor's voice shook. "I stayed because I recognized your pain." Edmund's eyes brightened. "And I recognized your courage." Eleanor managed a small laugh through tears. "Courage is a grand word for a maid who did not know when to stop." Edmund's gaze held hers. "Courage is refusing to sign a lie when the whole palace holds out the pen." Eleanor's breath caught. "And love is saying yes when the whole world says no." Edmund's voice roughened. "Yes, He leaned closer, stopping again just short of impropriety, as if he was still learning that he no longer needed to fear every breath. "Eleanor," he said, "I cannot promise you a life without whispers." Eleanor whispered back, "Whispers are quieter than tonics." Edmund's mouth tightened, then softened into something close to a smile. "True." Eleanor looked up at him, her voice steady now. "Promise me one thing." Edmund's gaze sharpened. "Anything." Eleanor swallowed. "Promise me you will never again accept silence as your punishment." Edmund's eyes held hers. "I promise." Eleanor's lips trembled. "And I promise I will never again accept humiliation as my fate." Edmund's breath caught. "Good." They walked slowly down the corridor toward the new wing that would no longer be forgotten, hand in hand, not hidden, not denied. And if the palace still had doors, still had rules, still had people who believed love should obey rank, Eleanor and Edmund carried something stronger than any schedule. The quiet, stubborn truth that a person is not a problem to be managed, but a life to be honored. And sometimes all it takes to change a fate is one brave soul refusing to look away. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.